Like the evil of men, I'm deceiving you, leaving you dead, but I flow with medieval intent. Feel no need to intervene, a step in my arena. Fuck around, get eaten, I am a hyena. Top of the food chain, I'll never relent. There's no talking me off of this ledge. I'm a tie in the throne like Saddam and Assad and Gaddafi. I'm bombing these foes, and I'm off with the hands till the guillotine. Design a killer's feel like the military of Philippines. The superhuman ability filling me as a Phillips. See, I'm a millisecond millimeter from becoming even iller than Attila the Hun. When I will, I turn into a motherfucking gorilla. Godzilla the Willoughby, say nobody can really be in vicinity. My enemies cower, they with the divinity, power the cowards, cause y'all are mini-me's. So let it be known that when I make flows, I got infinity stones, cause I'm paid notes with a stranglehold. To this whole motherfucking game, I go insane when I blow. Stain that you throw, bang, the chain goes back, and I chain to the flow. Praise getting blown, and it pains me to know that the anger is so dangerous. I'm just no ape shit, get irate, no patience of flow. Face it, I'm your ace in the hole, so the whole table will fold. And I'm taking you back to the depths of my soul. It's so black, if you go, then you'll never come back. It'll be taking the toll when you can't even begin to breathe, and you're heaving and wheezing. Went off of the deep end, been working so hard that I'm not even taking time off on the weekends. I'm off on my rocker, I'm not even sleeping shit. I need a doctor before I turn into a heathen. You're seeing the demons that taunt me at night in the mind of a genius. I've been through the winter, rain, the sun, the fire, smoke. You could take my life, but dog, I still be called the gold. Superheroes coming in my motherfucking door, but I don't think these bitches ready for infinity stones. Yeah, I've been through the winter, rain, the sun, the fire, smoke, but I don't think these bitches ready for infinity stones. So can I get a pen? Let me get a name, and I never made a man with a fake friend on his back for the play pen and killing shit again. So this villain will offend. Are you layman's kid? I'm amazing. I spit in his place and then rip out the cage, but inflicting my rage on you bitches. My cadence is vicious, and a flash shit can hit you like taking a picture. Try even I sling this shit, king of this bitch when I'm swinging this thing. I'm a jig like it's Wimbledon. Then again, I was killing shit since a little kid. Am I legitimate? Me, the demon is a left, it's like I'm trying to be one like Timberland. Kim Kardashian, Photoshop, breaking the internet. Take your opinion and chop it up, but never run around number one in this bitch. So let it be known that when I make flows, I got infinity stones cause I'm Thanos. I got infinity stones cause God gave me the strength for me to pull through. 22 fucking years I went through hell as my mental health was in a cell like I entered jail. So this shit ain't ended well, I'm scared frozen stiff when the walls of life have been closing in. No one up on the throne to sit cause I smashed every record but the gold I've yet to set. So I hold my breath as I reach for the sky, rise, set that bar so high. Why? So nobody will ever be equal with lies, cause nobody will ever be better than me till I meet my demise. Just try. You motherfuckers ain't even close to the rhymes, to the level I'm at, getting posterized, but I rap devil impact. I'm gone, so I'll never be back. Leaving you dead in your tracks under the head of the class while you're last, and you never gon' pass me. So then ask me for Jack, Bumble Rap, and Vendetta. Won't let up till I'm clapping Berettas. I'm Little Pump's head, and I'm Yachty and Uzi. I'm Pushy, so rude, even Kanye could get it. Motherfuckers really wanna see me go to hell, but I don't really give a damn about opinions. If you can tell, I wish you hated bitches while I just excel. I never taken any L's. I felt the weight that goes to pelling. I get at him, attacking it with the javelin, rat-a-tat, automatic, bitch, I'm battering like a paladin from here to the Vatican. It's unanimous, I never been no Anakin. My name is Luke, I've had it with the shenanigans. No mannequin challenge, I plan to do damage to any Madeline, Madigan, I'm Madeline. It don't matter about the friggin' analysis or whatever the fuck the pattern is. I've had it with the babbling, I'm Madigan, you be leaving in the ambulance. So let it be known that when I make flows, I got infinity stones cause I'm Thanos.
Hello guys, how's everybody doing? Hopefully everybody can hear me well enough. Today we were going to be doing something half decent, but unfortunately it's not gone that way. Unfortunately, it's not gone the way that I thought that it was going to go. To be honest with you, it hasn't gone that way. Unfortunately, time zone differences and all that sort of great stuff. Apparently, all of that's gone really well. We were going to be talking about some, as I said, some decent stuff, but I've set up a show. I needed to do a show. I've asked a couple of people if they wanted to come on, so we'll see if they get back in contact. I believe Means of Destruction, you do have a message that is waiting for you on Discordia if you are so inclined, and I don't have to do anything. Then I can have you on if you are free, sir. You are free and you are wanting to talk about this, then please come on. If not, then I've got a couple of little stories that we can talk about, I suppose. I've just sent Memes the link, so we shall see if he comes on. Hopefully he does, because I really need somebody to come on and speak to. So that would be good. And hi, Mr. Memes of Destruction. Yeah, I do have some stories that I'm interested in doing. but we shall see. I'll give Memes of Destruction about 4 or 5 minutes to be able to get on. How's everybody actually doing? Because I really would like to be able to talk about this should prisoners get a vote aspect, because I haven't really put this around because I don't think that it's going to be going as I planned, so I don't really want to shoot it around too much or share it as such, but I still need to do some form of show. I've hit people up saying that I'm going to be doing a show. I probably need to do something, but considering like I've done fuck all this week as well, I probably need to do something. So in the chat, if you are still around in the chat, obviously, please let me know what you think of this. Should prisoners get a vote or should they not? I'm not going to juggle Mr. Semantic. I'm not going to do that.
Well, why not? We all want to see you juggle. Juggling is entertaining.
I can't Means of Destructions. I can't. The only thing I can juggle is life.
Oh, well, I have enough trouble doing that as well. So, but that's a very interesting question. The sheer fact that Senator Sanders put that up there, I guess him and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they might have a little bit of a difference on how they think. But I started thinking about it for a while, and we've pretty much come to accept that it's like, at least in the United States, if somebody's convicted of a felony, they lose their ability to vote as well as run for president of the United States as well. And then I thought about it some more, and he said it was a fundamental right, which I sit back and I think, and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say that I believe in freedom of speech, basically as we understand it, basically aside from the whole inciting or causing of violence or direct threats against another individual's physical well-being, if voting is a fundamental... Go on. Sure.
What's the reason why we don't do the incitement or calling to action?
No, because that's a reasonable expectation that something could occur. It's kind of like the shouting and fire in a crowded theater. Pardon?
Is it because it's considered a crime?
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. It could lead to potential harm. I got you.
Yeah, please carry on with your point. Because
that's a very good thing, because my noggin has been a jogging, so that's why this chat I think will be very useful for us, because if it is the ultimate expression per se of free speech within a representative democracy would be the right to vote. So then the question becomes, under what circumstances should a person be denied their right to vote? Mm-hmm. And as it has previously been deemed, if one is convicted of a felony in a court of law, they remove that right. It's very interesting. I think there has been, I believe, some cases in California where certain folks were, when they had potentially lost that right, or maybe it was something more simple as in getting convictions overturned for like simple possession of like marijuana or certain related drugs. I believe there have been things like that, but it is a very interesting discussion because, at what point should you deny a citizen the right to vote? I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, I'm only going on from my aspect. I can't speak for anybody else, obviously. But for me, my aspect would be from the understanding that if you commit a right, your rights are then limited. Now, they're not taken away. You are still an aspect of human rights, and I accept that they should and do have rights of being looked after and protected to make sure that they're fed well, that they're not taken advantage of, so on and so forth. But is voting a privilege? And if it's not, why do we not give it to people that are not citizens of the country?
That is a good question. Is it a privilege or is it a right?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that would lead into a lot of the fundamental difference. If one considers it a privilege is something that can be taken away. A right is something that is not taken away so easily. But going into that same context as well, the United States, we still do have the death penalty, at least federally, on the books. It varies state by state. I know here in the Commonwealth, we don't have it. I believe New Hampshire, just north of me, still has that as well. So, but federally, we do support the death penalty, which would be the ultimate stifling of somebody's speech because you are taking the person's life at that point. Oh, absolutely. Well, the right to life, you're taking the right to life.
Yeah.
We have deemed that there is a legal process available in order to deprive a citizen of life.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. But the point that I was trying to make is that if it's a right for people to be able to vote, why do we not give the right to vote for non-citizens?
Well, because they're not necessarily members of the country; they're visitors at the time, as far as I
Sure,
know. Yeah.
sure. But I suppose the connotations that I'm supposedly drawing from that is that that means that the right isn't universally given to every form of citizen or every form of person. So if we can kind of pick and choose that it's only for citizens of that country, and you do something against the country while you're serving your sentence and crime against the country, why should you have the privilege of voting?
That is very interesting, just because what you were kind of just touching upon right there, because individuals whom are within the borders of the country are actually they fall under U.S. law. They fall under U.S. law. That's why I think a lot of it comes down to the measuring of folks, and a lot of it does actually come down to the census. I mean, I guess ironically enough, because that seems to be something that's in the news as well, to basically determine the actual number of folks living within the individual states in order to determine how they should be represented as well. So, because that's why I know there's a big thing about whether they should ask whether someone is currently a United States citizen or not, and that seems to be kind of something up for debate. And I guess MC actually shared at one point. He actually worked for the Census Bureau at one point, and I actually had a former roommate that worked and did the census. I think the last 10 years ago as well. And what is that? You're going door to door and you're asking people a lot of questions that they don't want to answer. And that's something, I mean, I can feel a little bit of, I can feel that, because I did used to do door to door sales. So I used to go around knock on a lot of doors, and you definitely get to meet America that way. They told me, they prepared me for that, and leads to some great situations and some not so great situations. But
Sure,
hey,
but there are certain things that need to be done, and there's certain things that don't need to be done. For instance, if you don't have a census, how can you gauge if you're going to have a hospital and what size you're going to upgrade a hospital if you don't know who's living in your area and
well,
what
it
their
comes,
needs
yeah, yeah. You want to have as much accurate data as you can, because the more data you have, and again, accurate data, you can have all the data in the world, and if the data isn't accurate, it's going to skew whatever result you have.
Sure.
So,
But the point that I was trying to go with that, and the point that I was making beforehand was with prisoners, is it a case of we limit their rights because they can't go around and walk around at their own free will? They can't go around and go in and out of the prison at their own free will, depending on level of prison and their sentencing, obviously, but generally. They can't do that. Does that mean that we've already limited their rights, so to speak, or their privileges, so to speak? And is that just part and parcel of being able to vote? Because surely, if you're in a prison, you would also have extra guards that need to be put into place to have the vote. I mean that everybody else would have to go in to be able to monitor the vote, make sure there's no vote tampering, and so on and so forth. So that also puts more of a strain on the actual country itself. But most importantly, is it a right or a privilege for them to even vote in the first place? Because we already limit their rights or privileges to begin with.
oh, that's very true. And I believe the purpose of prison, and I guess this is up for debate now, is to basically punish a person by depriving them of their freedom for a specified amount of time, whatever they are actually sentenced to. As far as it, but then again, you also ask, well, is prison supposed to be there? Is it supposed to be punitive, or is it supposed to be recuperatory? Like, are you supposed to be preparing somebody for their entrance to be a positive effect when they are released back in society, or we just kind of throw in the book at them? So that's something that seems a bit unclear as well. And I realize it's going to depend on the situation. Somebody that's gone out there and murdered and burnt down a house full of an entire young family and stuff, that's a much different situation. That maybe somebody that got spooked, ran for the cops, resisted arrest a little bit, but didn't cause any actual true harm to somebody. So it's...
Sure, I can give some form of a ground on that aspect where it depends on the crime. But then if you go on depending of the crime, do we not then go into punitive discrimination from people that have done stuff by different crimes and then discriminate on the crimes that they've done to what they can do. So instead of it just being a blanket, no, you've broken federal law, you're now picking and choosing which laws are now deemed enough for you to be able to vote or not. Surely that's a discriminatory practice, possibly a good one, but is it not that in practice?
Well, and again, I may need a little more clarification on that, but from what you were laying out there, that's why we are supposed to have ex post facto, by meaning a person cannot be charged with something that was not a crime prior to something becoming a law. So that actually is in the Bill of Rights there. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you were alluding to there, or I think your question was something different.
Definitely not. No, the question was definitely something different. What it was is because you were laying out a formulated point of trying to say that if you were done for, say, I don't know, drug trafficking, not drug trafficking, selling drugs or holding drugs on possession, for instance, or jaywalking, for instance, then you're suggesting that they should be able to get a vote if they were incarcerated. My point was that no matter what the level of the punitive federal crime is, would it not be better to have a blanket statement of saying that anybody that's incarcerated can't have a vote, rather than being discriminatory to what level of crime you have committed to being able to lose a right or a privilege, or in some people's cases, a duty to vote?
Oh no, that's very interesting. And actually, let me actually bring this up if that's all right, because I really, this isn't something I really haven't researched a lot, so I'm actually very curious. So since we're here, let's take a look at the article. And this is from the lawdictionary.org here, and here's the first article that came up on Google. Let me just present. All right. So, what rights do convicted felons lose? Convicted felons lose rights from voting to employment, depending on their state of residence. While some of the rights convicted felons lose may be restored over time, some of the rights are lost forever. Throughout the United States, some of the general rights convicted felons lose are as follows, varying state by state: voting, traveling abroad, the right to bear arms or own guns, jury service, employment in certain fields, public social benefits and housing, as well as parental benefits. And then they go into a blurb right here, and I just want to read this last one featuring the voting rights. So, lost voting rights. In some states, convicted felons lose rights to vote temporarily while they are serving the length of their sentence. Upon release from jail, they're able to vote once again. In others, convicted felons do not lose the right to vote at any time, while some states do not restore convicted felons' right to vote unless further action, underlined, is taken on behalf of the inmate. For instance, the convicted felon can apply for a governor's pardon or withstand a waiting period after they've been released. They might have to complete terms of probation or parole or pay outstanding fines as well. That's very interesting. I didn't know any of that, so...
No, I didn't either, to be fair. Mr. Colt of Ham has just come into play as well, which is one of the original guests. I would just like to make a point before introducing everybody, getting on to what the main topic is and whatnot, which is this anyway. But I would say that I completely and utterly disagree with anybody that states that after prisoners have served their sentences, that they lose their right to vote. I am completely and utterly against that. I don't think it matters. Because even with people that say, well, convicted murderers shouldn't vote ever, or pedophiles shouldn't vote ever, what about pedophiles that have never been caught? They still vote. It doesn't fucking matter. The point is that they've served their sentence, and that means all their rights should be given back to them, unless the crime affects what their job could be. As in, you don't want a child molested or working up in school. You know, common sense stuff.
Right. No, it's very, and because right there, what you described right there, CSG, I think is kind of one of the issues that a lot of folks are arguing over right now, is because we haven't really properly framed what we're talking about here. Because when you hear that, a lot of folks are like, wait, is he talking about folks in the prison? Like, are we talking about, like, as was cited, the Boston bomber, one of the two brothers that blew up a bunch of folks at the end of the Boston City Marathon and stuff? And I remember when I heard that on the radio, I'm just like, what? And you go back, you see the footage and everything, and that was a horrific act. Definitely. As far as I know, the brother that is still alive right now, who's currently in jail, and I believe he's either still going through his trial or has been convicted, I don't know. I haven't heard about him getting off at all. But as far as I know, yeah, he's a U.S. citizen. So if you're a U.S. citizen, according to Senator Sanders, he believes so strongly that the right to vote is inherent, that it shouldn't even be taken away necessarily in that case. And again, he may have had some caveats there and everything. I would need to fully listen to that segment there to kind of and see whatever his official policy would be. But as far as this goes, a lot of times, like, you're just saying that once somebody has served their debt to society, their rights should be restored, which isn't the case in some states, but is not something that is universal throughout these United States of America as well. And I think that's mostly what many folks would be open to, discussing it more in that framework, where Senator Sanders is taking it to another level.
Exactly. Mr. Colfan, would you like to put anything or any caveat into the conversation at this moment in time?
I think we can make certain exceptions for the most violent or the most egregious offenders, pedophiles, murderers, rapists, etc. But but since most prisoners honestly shouldn't even be in prison in the first place, because most prisoners are there for nonviolent drug offenses, marijuana possession and the like.
Maybe.
I think they should have, have a right to vote. Not, as part of a, because let me step back here for a moment. The American prison system is one of the most punitive systems in the Western world, at least. If you look at at the prison systems in Western Europe or Europe in general, they have a prison system much more focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. And
sure, I agree. The American system should be changed in that way. It should have more of an emphasis on rehabilitation rather than letting offenders happen. But while they're serving their time, that's a little bit different, regardless of whether you think that the time should be served as a punishment or if it should be served as a rehabilitation. What happens to their rights or to their privileges in what I would see it as, not as a right. I don't think it's a right for people to vote. I think it's a privilege.
Obviously, some rights of theirs should be suspended. No prisoner has the right to bear arms for obvious reasons. But some rights, like the right to vote, they are still a U.S. citizen, and they are still affected by policy passed by our policymakers.
Sure, I agree with
if Senator Evil McScumface decides to pass a law that says prisoners should have to eat shit and piss for breakfast and dinner, the prisoners should have some kind of say in that.
Why?
Because they're U.S. citizens and they are affected by a policy passed by our system.
Sure, but just saying that they're U.S. citizens doesn't explain why they should have a vote that affects.
That's all the reason you need.
No, that's not all the reason I need. If I was a U.S. citizen and I decided to vote, or didn't decide to vote, then that's still not going to affect policy. If I decided not to vote, that's not going to affect policy. The thing that we're talking about is the aspect of the privilege of voting, not whether or not that they
voting is not a privilege.
Fine, voting is a right or anything else like that. You already said that you believe that some rights should be changed or taken away from them in aspect or in ideals. So why is it that voting should be given as a right to the prisoners? Explain why it should be given to the prisoners or kept.
I thought it was a certain unalienable right endowed to us by our Creator. Or at least that's how the document started. So,
yeah, sure. Does it actually state that prisoners should get the vote to right?
I mean, look at the rights that we suspend for prisoners. They're suspended for the reasons of housing them in a confined space for they don't have the right to bear arms because obvious. They don't have right to freely move about because obvious. Yeah,
Sure.
all the rights that we do suspend is suspended for a very good reason.
Go on.
There is no actual safety reason or
Careful where you're
reason
going
to.
with this. Careful where you're going with this, because there are 2.2 million people in the US system at this moment in time. So be careful where you're going with your thought process.
Well, wait, 2.2 million?
Well, if you're talking about total incarcerated individuals, that sounds like it may be a fair number. That may even be low. I mean, it wouldn't really surprise me. But the sheer fact is, again, everybody that is currently serving time, that falls along a very broad spectrum of different offenses and things that we have deemed to be crimes as well. I would take a little bit of issue with something that you did say, Cultaham, there, saying because they're American citizens, there are many people serving sentences within prisons that may or may not currently be U.S. citizens as well. And that kind of goes back to, if you're operating something within the United States of America, you abide by the laws of the land here. And there actually was an instance where I believe it was, I think, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, I believe he was either down in MC's alma mater of New Mexico or maybe Arizona there. I'm sorry, I realized I switched those up. But he was a sheriff down there, and he actually did make some of the prisoners wear like pink dresses and stuff like that. And he was actually setting out kind of like tent camps and stuff outside. And he actually was convicted. No, he actually was convicted, I believe, of dehumanizing.
Do you have a dog or a cat?
Pardon?
Yeah, you have a cat. That's fine. Never mind. Carry on.
Kitty.
Oh, okay. So as we're all distracted by the master cat there, no, it does go back to, and again, in the Constitution itself, we don't want to have cruel or unusual punishment, and sometimes that may go into the whole. You're making somebody. Oh, okay, Char. You're making somebody kind of wear a dress and stuff like that. It's like, really, do you have to do that? He was convicted. And then President Trump did actually set precedent, as I think that's the earliest. Well, actually, no, maybe Nixon was different. But he basically did pardon Joe Arpaio for something that literally he may have still appealed and gone off of there. So it is one of those things where things like that do happen. But if you're operating with the United States, you need to follow U.S. law, because that is the law of the land. Yeah. And if you're going to follow the law of the land, it needs to be done equally for the folks there. That's why it is very interesting. It does seem to kind of go into the whole, because there are certain folks where if we deem them to be a threat to society, or I think somebody, maybe it was Sticks that said the whole term lunatic. Like if somebody is going to actively be a threat to themselves or society, okay, maybe we're not going to sell little kind of wacky Uncle Shelburne that sawed-off shotgun. Maybe that's not a good idea. It's like, so, but then again, that is a Second Amendment, not the First Amendment. So, I mean, you could say there's an argument there, but then again, you could say there's a little bit of established precedent as well. So, I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think that we should stick to the point of using the system that's already in place. We could all argue that any system or prison system in itself could be changed. We can all argue that. We could all argue that certain crimes shouldn't be put into place. I can argue that. You can argue that. So can Cult of Ham. I don't think that we should be arguing what considers itself as a crime, because we're talking about a blanket statement of should prisoners get a vote or not. So in my aspect, I honestly do not think that prisoners should get a vote. The reason why is because they've already broken their social contract with society. So to me, if they've broken their social contract with society by breaking the law, so to speak, then by my definition, they should not have the right to then affect that societal change while they are serving their time. Afterwards, fair enough. But while they're serving their time and debt back to society, they shouldn't have the social contract and right to be able to vote, in my opinion.
No, it's very interesting. Go ahead, Colt.
I mean, I see this issue, of course, from both sides, and there are convincing arguments on both sides. These prisoners, they've broken the law and some rights are indeed suspended, but still they are still U.S. citizens. They are affected by policy passed by lawmakers.
Sure.
They should have a say on, you know,
So are illegal immigrants, though. Does that mean that they should get it right?
are they U.S. citizens?
No, listen to what your argument was. That the policy will affect them.
Yeah,
So will it affect illegal aliens, so to speak.
and that
So
they
should
are
they get a vote in the
they are
system as
U.S.
well? As it affects
citizens.
them? Can I finish?
I mean, your premise is wrong. Yeah,
No,
I said that they are still U.S. citizens. They are still affected by policy passed by lawmakers.
Yes, they are. Exactly, they are. I agree with you. I completely agree with you. They are. But using your premise, using what you've just said, then illegal aliens are also affected by policy that is made in that country, in your country, my country, whatever country. So they should get rights to vote as well because it affects them by policy.
Are they U.S. citizens?
CSG. I think you're basing on what I prefaced with, because I was saying that certain folks that are within the prison system are not necessarily U.S. citizens, but they must still abide by the law when they're here. So I think that may be where it's coming. I could be wrong.
No. Court of Ham said that because they are US citizens, that the policies affect them, so they should vote on the policies that affect them. By that premise, illegal aliens and the policies that are set by US government would affect the US aliens, illegal aliens. So
I think you're just kind of accepting the fact that if they were citizens, who was that? I think that's more of a semantic argument. That's not necessarily an unfair argument.
The reason why it's not a semantic argument is because your premise of argument is because they are affected by policy, they should get a right to vote.
They are not U.S. citizens. They are not entitled to the right to vote.
I understand that, but your argument is because they are affected by policy, they should vote.
But the disqualifying factor is they're not U.S. citizens.
What he's saying is, if you're going to take it as a very core, literal philosophical argument, basically it would be phrased more as those who are citizens of the United States of legal voting age should be able to vote upon issues that affect them.
Sure. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but when you break the social contract, you are still citizens and still have some rights, but voting on aspects where you could say, I don't know, let's lower the prison sentences, might be affected by the people that are, in prison. Hence why they don't get to vote on that.
Well, then by that logic, should people who work at prisons be able to vote on prison policy? Should the
because they are not committing a crime and not serving time against the social contract of criminality.
They directly benefit from having prisoners stay longer in prisons. I mean, the whole reason why we
officers don't.
I mean, are you not aware of the private prison industry here in America?
Well, you were saying
private prison industry.
Workers, not owners. You were saying workers, not owners, meaning officers generally, or correctional officers, if you so choose to use that term, which means they don't want people to stay in the prisons. They just want to go to work and do their time, so to speak. You're talking about owners.
The argument against that, CSG, would be the more butts you have in cells, the more correctional officers and staffing you would need, so it would continue to expand the operation. I understand from an individual perspective, they'd rather have as few prisoners as possible because then statistically you're going to have less issues.
Not always, but yes, I do understand what your premise is. But it's the case of just saying that, oh, well, because these citizens that have not done anything wrong to anybody would then come across and then make changes to policy. That's what every fucking citizen does. That's not affected by going against the social contract and committing criminality. That's the point. Why do criminals get the right to vote? Not why do citizens get the right to vote?
Well, I mean, that not all criminals are these, irredeemable monsters that are.
Never said they were. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that you cannot vote afterwards, after you've served your time. My argument is why you're serving.
Okay, so we frame it. So right now, Colt, it sounds like we're talking about individuals who are convicted of a crime within a court of law that are currently serving their sentence to society. So this is the framework, I guess. I was a little confused as well.
I'm saying is, these criminals, most of them are just decent people who are caught up in hard times, or that they were caught just they're smoking a little bit of weed, altering their consciousness a little bit, or maybe they're
They
desperate
made a
for
mistake. We all fuck up. It
yeah.
happens. Not all of us
It-
always get caught though, and yeah.
Sure.
I don't.
Crime. My point isn't what crime it is, because if you want to get into the semantics of what the crime is, then all you're doing is discriminating against other criminals that have caused different crimes. What level do you go to? What degree do you go to? Why is it not a blanket statement? Why is it not a blanket sweep as it is? Otherwise, you're
Because
discriminating
not
against
all
certain
crimes
people.
are equal.
Fine, I understand that.
I mean, we can deny the right to vote to the most egregious offenders, murderers, rapists, pedophiles,
But
etc.
that's not what Sanders is
Well,
saying.
actually, let's focus this conversation a little more because I think we're kind of talking a passage. So CSG has kind of phrased it as folks that are currently serving their time to society, and I believe the only folks that we actually within these United States actually remove the right to are those convicted of a felony. So now we would be encompassing incarcerated felons currently, just to kind of refocus.
That's well.
So now we're going to have to break
kind of
down
what I
within a
was talking
felony.
about, but not necessarily clarifying, felons. We can allow people who are, blanket statement. Anyone who's got a misdemeanor, allow them to vote because a crime serious.
Hence why I said incarcerated. Hence why I said incarcerated.
Can't be incarcerated for misdemeanor.
I don't know. Explain what misdemeanors can be incarcerated for, because I don't know your system.
You can be. You can definitely be incarcerated. So, like, for instance, like if let's say you're in a Texas or whatever, and assuming pot is still illegal in Texas, you get caught smoking a joint, you get thrown in there. Maybe you spend 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and let's say maybe after that you were summoned to go to court, maybe you miss a parole or something, so that's an additional misdemeanor, or maybe it brings back whatever it is, should you lose your right to vote there. I'm just looking up to see what it is, because I don't think it affects misdemeanors, but it may be state by state, so just continue on, gentlemen.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll speak to felony to make it easier. What's classified as a felony then? Is that burglary, robbery?
Pretty much anything. If you get caught with, marijuana 3 times, that's a felony somewhere.
3 times being caught with marijuana. How much? What, a joint? A 10 bag? A 20 bag? An 8 ball?
Yeah. Felonies are typically differentiated involving violence. All right. Or punishable by imprisonment for more than 1 year or by death.
So violent criminals then. So a felony is violent criminals or criminality that has some form of violence in it.
Yeah. But
I agree that all felons should never vote then. Should never be voting while they're in there serving their time.
All right.
According to Wikipedia, every state with the exception of Maine and Vermont prohibits felons from voting while in prison.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I think that should be the... Yeah, I think that should be blanket. Any felon for violent crimes or
so Senator Sanders is merely trying to extend a policy currently in Vermont to the rest of the country.
Oh, yeah, I wonder how Vermont got that passed.
Oh, they're a very liberal location, so I mean it's.
Where's Sanders' base? Where is he senator at?
Oh, Burlington. Yeah, he's out of Vermont.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to confirm.
And he only happens to be the most popular senator in America.
Who? Bernie Sanders is the most popular in the whole... Anyway, I don't want to get down that conversation. There's no point getting down that conversation. I don't think he's the most popular senator in the whole of...
He might have the most name recognition.
Yes, I agree with that. He's the most infamous and he's the most well-known. I'm
talking about actual approval ratings. He's the most popular in America.
Okay. If you say so.
Congress doesn't have the best approval rates in the first place, so it's not the highest of bars per se.
Bernie Sanders manages to be majority popular.
It's still not the point. The point of the conversation was to be talking about the idea of if this is a good idea or a bad idea, as in prisoners should get to vote or not.
I don't.
And we now settled it down to felons, which is criminals that have committed some form of violence in the crime they've committed.
I don't see any actual harmful side effects like actually coming from it, because prisoners, because prisoners, even as overinflated as they are here in America, they're less than 1%. I mean,
there are 2.2 million people. There are 2.2 million people total incarceration, or just over. That was in 2016, because they haven't updated recently.
That's 0.6%.
No, I understand that, which is around about the same sort of percentage as it is in the UK. We have 800-something thousand, which is about 0.6, 0.7%.
So I'm looking again at Wikipedia, and this is a bit alarming to me as well. So, felony jury exclusion, again, this is coming from Wikipedia. The lifetime exclusion of felons from jury service is the majority rule in the United States, used in 31 states and in federal courts. The result is that just over 6% of the adult population is excluded, including about 30% of black men.
Yeah.
Felon jury exclusion is less visible than felony disenfranchisement, and a few socio-legal scholars have challenged the status that withholds a convicted felon's opportunity to sit on a jury. So it's kind of like if you do not have the ability to represent basically your peers within a court of law, that's kind of what they're using as your ability to vote as well. Because there actually have been challenges that have gone both ways on this, higher up in the article here. So it's
sure. I'm not arguing that they should
right.
be able to sit on jury or not. To be honest, the common sense idea of that would be that if you're a convicted felon that maybe or could have ties to people that might be in your area, and you've been called to do jury service in your area, you might know the person. You might, and that just restricts the might from happening. That's not saying it does happen. It's restricting the might from happening.
I'm looking at this because there have been court cases such as Reynolds v. Sims. The court ruled that a right to vote is a fundamental right, establishing a strict scrutiny test. Further, the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the laws to all persons. However, Section 2 of this amendment allows states to remove voting privileges from anyone who has participated in rebellion or other crime. Okay,
Yep.
So that is codified in the law.
And in the Constitution by the 14th Amendment, that you lose your right if you commit a crime.
And that's established. It says 72, the Supreme Court found that this article applied to disenfranchisement of ex-felons. So again, this does seem to only apply to folks that were felons that have served. I'm not sure we're disagreeing on really much here.
It doesn't seem like it. Not unless Cult of Ham has any sort of grievance with that.
Is this another instance of, me and CSG just like really agreeing at one another aggressively on Twitter, like, on that healthcare thing a while back?
Well, nobody's ever misunderstood anybody else on the internet.
Especially on Twitter with only 280 characters. But I still don't see why, because, the whole premise of this is, why do prisoners not get to vote? So let's just summarize what we're talking about. Do we think in general that prisoners should be able to vote? Felons, do we think that they should be able to vote?
I see no good reason to deny them. Okay. And if I don't see any good reason to remove a freedom or a right or anything like that, I always default towards more freedom.
Sure.
And we have a severe lack of empathy in our judicial system, our American system in general. There's, it's always a uber libertarian, pull yourself up by your bootstrap, individualistic, hyper individualistic way of thinking we have here in America.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If it's all hyperalized individuality, then does that not mean that there cannot be any racism then? Not unless it's to an individual rather than a race.
Ask that again.
You said that the system itself seems to be hyper individualized and hyper. What was the word that you also used?
Oh, okay. Let me clarify. It's hyper personal responsibility, and towards the lower classes. I mean, it's pretty much a fact that we have a two-tier legal system here in America.
Yeah,
You know,
most
one
systems do.
for the elite and one for everyone else.
If you
Yeah,
happen to have the
most
means to access a great attorney, you're much statistically more likely of being able to get off for a much reduced sentence. I mean, that's
Sure,
that's
nobody's
absolutely
going to
true.
deny that. Sure,
And,
nobody's going to deny that.
race and sex also play into it. You know, when
You
women
said it was hyper personalized.
bro,
I mean, you have to
pro-
pick one or the other. Is it racial? Is it racialized or is it personalized? Because if it's personalized, it can't be racialized.
personal responsibility.
Fine, personal responsibility also takes away from race, then, doesn't it? It means that your personal responsibility, regardless of race. So
How?
pick one. Is it racist or is it not?
How does one exclude the other?
Because you cannot be racist if you're picking on a person. To be racist, you have to pick on the group.
You're discriminating on an individual by basis of them being on a group. I think what we see here is the way the system is set up by the letter of the law. It doesn't allow for discrimination. However, in effect, we seem to have discriminatory outcomes. And that leads into a question of why we are seeing this. Because I'm not going to lie, just going through that, like, if 30% of adult black guys don't even have the right to vote, dude, you're going to feel like, well, I mean, that just seems to be a problem, man. Any group like that.
Names, hang on just a second. Remember, that's 36 or 30% of 6% of total felons.
No. I think it broke down. I'll reread it. Hold on. Let me share just because maybe I did completely. I hope I misread that. Just because that is. All right, hold on.
I thought it was like 6% of Americans can't vote and 30% of the black population can't vote.
Okay, so the result is over 6% of the adult population is excluded, including about 30% of black men. And the citation.
Is that to do with felony
I'm just going to the exclusion.
Because if it's felony during exclusion and a lifetime exclusion of felon, hang on, go back.
Okay.
Go back. Go back to where it's where it was at the top.
It's Canada, United States. All right. Right there.
And if you don't mind to present to everybody, so when I speak, I don't take the thing off because I should really be doing
you can present them.
Yeah, I know. I said I should be doing, but it says, look, at the top there, it says, let me just do this. It'll be a lot fucking easier. There we go. Present to everybody. It says lifetime exclusion of felons from jury service is the majority rule in the United States, used in 31 states in the federal courts. The result is that over 6% from previous sentence and statement of felons of the adult population is excluded. And of that 6%, 30% of them are black men. To continue onwards, felony jury exclusion is less visible than felony disenfranchisement. Still talking about felony jury exclusion. So the percentages still count as felons.
But it's saying that over 6% of the adult population is excluded. Felons from juries. This is the majority.
Yes. 6% of the population, adult population, is felons.
Okay.
Overall, throughout their lifetime.
And it's saying like 30% of black men are felons.
Yeah, which is around about 38% of people of color or black men are in prison at this moment in time. It goes with the statistics.
Right, but CSG, you can kind of see how, like, if you look at that statistic and you're just doing a cursory overview, that seems pretty damn high for any group.
No, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. It's 6% of your total population, and of that 6% of your total population, 30% of that 6% are black men.
I think it's saying 6% overall, because if we got upwards of 350 million here, that'd be 18. So that'd be about 21 million total.
Yes,
people.
over a lifetime means over a lifetime, felony stays with you.
Right. Well, unless it's expunged.
That's it's over a lifetime. That's over a lifetime. If you have 2.2 million people in prisons for over 10 years, that's 22 million. That's not a lifetime, is it?
No. So it could
So
be
that
higher.
means 6%. Well, I'm just saying, as easy maths, rather, because I'm not that intelligent, but as easy maths, 10 years at 2.2 million is 22 million. So that would add up to 6% of the population at that point in time, and that's just 10 years. That means 6% of that population is felonies, and 30% of that population is black men, which is around about what it is in the prison service at the minute, around about 38%, I believe.
I believe the total classification of individuals who classify in black in the United States is about 14 million. If you assume roughly 50% are dudes, 7 million, and 30% of that, dude, it's like 2.7, 2.8 million. You're pushing 3 million individuals of a particular community that don't have the ability to vote, and that seems kind of shitty. I mean, you can argue over what happened. They were convicted.
No, that's not great. No. Stop conflating what we're talking about. At this minute in time, we're talking about felony jury exclusion. Does that mean that they cannot vote after they've had the exclusion from jury?
It depends on the state, because it says the majority rule is in 31 states that basically you have a lifetime exclusion. That is the current majority of these states.
From jury.
I had a coworker at work who was a felon. He committed a robbery years back, and he's not only is he unable to buy a gun, but he's also forbidden from being able to vote. Even though obviously he's turned his life around. And this was this is in Illinois, probably one of the more, or probably one of the assumed to be more liberal states in America.
See, I'm looking to this, and I kind of go by. It's like I look at the current context right below it, the right to possess firearms, and it says here from 1968, felons are regarded by the federal government and most U.S. states as being prohibited persons under U.S. law 18 U.S.C. Section 922G. It is a Class C felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison under this subsection to ship or transport in interstate or foreign commerce or possess in any or affecting commerce any firearm or ammunition, or to receive any firearm or ammunition which has been shipped or transferred in interstate or foreign commerce. This has been litigated before the Supreme Court. However, the court upheld the regulation.
Sure. But how does this have anything to do with voting rights? I understand that other rights are taken away, and maybe they should be given back, and maybe they shouldn't. But that's not.
We're trying to define when a person should potentially lose a right provided by the Constitution, and if voting is a right.
In the 14th Amendment, which you already read out, if they commit a crime,
right. Well, that's from a different pathwork, and this is the issue, because the more laws you pass, the more convoluted and contradictions you're going to find, which is why we end up going to the courts, and the courts will end up usually rule something. But then, if you really want to change it, it's important to people. Congress should actually go back and modify the law, or maybe actually do something crazy like, I don't know, maybe repeal a couple of things and replace it with maybe something better. I don't know.
And remember that part of the 14th Amendment was generally regarding the the Civil War, the Southern rebels.
It did say rebellion or other crimes. Other crimes is the very broad point. I think many people under the rebellion, well, I don't know, maybe it's not as controversial nowadays, but I don't know. That's why when you have very broad things, you have a very broad net you throw out there, and eventually you're going to catch a lot of folks that maybe the law was not intended to do. So that's why you need to be very careful with the words we use.
Sure, no, I completely agree. But the point is that you can't use the Constitution to say that they're entitled to their rights to vote in this instance, because it states in the Constitution that if you commit a crime, you cannot. That's the only point.
Oh, yeah. No, we're having this discussion right now. And again, I realize CSG, we're kind of getting outside the framework that we're actually trying to discuss, because it does seem that if somebody commits a misdemeanor, in general, unless they happen to be in a particular state that allows for that, if you're currently incarcerated, you don't have the way to go to a voting station. Perhaps one may have the right to send in for an absentee ballot. That may be possible. But right now we're specifying felons who generally have that lifetime restriction, saying that we're having the discussion of felons while serving their debt to society, should they have the right to vote. And what I kind of hear from most everyone here is it's a subjective thing depending on the level of offense. So now we're kind of operating in here. So are we going to do it strictly violent felonies, like you have harmed another person, you have actually physically like caused them perhaps death or dismemberment, or just I don't know, like where do we have, like what are your guys' thoughts?
What about embezzlement or fraud?
That's a very good question as well, because we tend to focus on more of just the hands-on physically doing that. I mean, there are arguments that even Bernie Madoff, after he screwed folks out of upwards of $60 billion, that I believe there was at least one gentleman that ended up taking his life because a great deal of his life savings and everything was just completely kaput. So you could say that there could be harm. Was that foreseeable? I mean, Mr. Madoff did have a fiduciary duty to those individuals. Just from my limited time in the financial industry, you have a duty to use that money wisely and stuff. And apparently he just had it on an old Windows 95 PC with a spreadsheet and was just throwing bullshit out there.
Probably. But if we agree that fraud and embezzlement is something that's worth considering, then that's basically just theft. Now, don't get me wrong. It's intelligent theft, but it's theft. So does that mean theft in general should be classified as that as well?
No, because I mean, when we're talking about fraud and embezzlement, that's a white that's like a
white collar
white collar crime. Maybe like more egregious white collar crimes.
I'm not going to deny that it is, but I don't see how embezzlement or fraud is any different to theft.
It's a form of theft. It is a form of theft. It's kind of like you're playing a system hoping you're not going to get caught for your transgressions against other folks that maybe it costs them their homes or something like that. I mean, that's a very shitty situation. I mean, again, like this is something that's going on within the public conversation here in the States. Senator Sanders did bring it up, and now that has triggered a conversation that we're having right now. And it's a very interesting conversation, because I'm not 100% sure myself. I mean, I do cherish the right of people to be able to speak freely. And I believe one of the ultimate rights of being able to speak freely is the right to vote. However, we do have established law and precedent specifying situations. However, these situations are not universal. And as we saw, at least according to Wikipedia, there are at least 2 states, including Senator Sanders' home state of Vermont, where they do have exceptions. So This is entering the public conversation, and it's going to be interesting.
I mean, overall, I personally don't have too much of a problem with certain levels of prisoners not being able to vote. I don't have a problem with that. The problem that I have is specifically when Sanders and others, Camilla Harris and a couple of others, have come out and said that they would support everyone having a right to vote. just from my own ideology and my own thinking and my own opinion in myself, I just don't see why people that have committed such heinous crimes in general, or even to the point of taking somebody else's freedoms away from them, whether it would be theft, whether it would be other aspects of embezzlement, or whether it would be burglary or whatever, I don't see why those people, while they are serving, should have the right to vote and impact other people.
Personally, this is only my theory. I think it may more be a tactical decision, because the way things work here in America is, you have one side with one position, you have one side with the other position, and if they both strongly, fight over their positions, eventually you'll get a compromise somewhere in between. I think what Bernie Sanders is doing is doing the most radical position to get a good compromise.
Sure. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's definitely not politicking. It's definitely politicking. It's definitely trying to get one side to fight for something in general. It's just, for me, I mean, obviously I'm not American, so it doesn't really affect me in any way whatsoever. It's just, as Memes has said, it's a very interesting conversation on how different people feel about different rights and whatnot. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm one of those people that does believe that you should have your rights overall, and I don't think anybody should really infringe on them. But my caveat to that has always been that if you inflict or go against a social contract that is supposed to protect you, to give you those rights, I personally feel while you're serving your debt to society, that you don't have all of your rights. Now, you have the right to life, you have the right to be in yourself and whatnot and looked after and so on and so forth. But to having the right to vote, I don't think while you're serving, you should have the right to vote in certain instances.
I think Ham is actually onto something here, because this might actually go into, and again, I realize there has been a passage of some comprehensive, basically judicial reforms and stuff within the criminal justice system and stuff, because a lot of times it's like, okay, if you are convicted of something, you lose your rights for that time. However, once you serve your debt to society, you have the ability to get out and then operate as a functioning individual within society again. The issue a lot of folks have run into is, regardless if you get convicted of something, or maybe your best shot to basically your own personal self-interest survival of you or your family may be to plead out. If you plead out or you have a conviction, even after you serve your debt to society, you go to apply for a job and stuff. It's like, well, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And they're going to do the background checks and stuff. And if they see that stuff there, a lot of folks are like, well, if I'm out here and I'm ready to work and act as a productive member of society, but I can't get a job because I have that conviction, that puts people under certain circumstances where they're going to be much more likely to engage in illicit activities, even just to survive, which will increase the rate of recidivism within the system. And if Senator Sanders is putting that out there as a much more extreme thing, because, I mean, let's face it, if you're going to say the Boston bomber, the brother that's still alive, should have the right to vote, that's an incredibly bold, and I think most folks would see there as an out there statement. And this is and I'm trying to be very reserved, because I mean that did happen in my home Commonwealth as well, and it's Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and like that's something that's horrific. And we shut down freaking Boston for a couple of days. It's like, no, you're not going to do this in our fucking city, to quote David Ortiz. So I mean, that's an out there thing where even if it doesn't get to the point where the Boston bomber, should he, or if he has been convicted, doesn't get that right to vote, maybe certain rights will be afforded to at least other people, almost kind of like a Hegelian dialect. It's kind of like what President Trump does. He'll say something completely out there. It's like, we should build a post office on the moon. And everyone's like, oh, you're absolutely nuts. We're going to build it in Antarctica. You're completely crazy. We built it on Main Street. So one side can say, well, we've restricted him from building this base on the moon. And he's like, oh, all I wanted was the mailbox on Main Street. So it's kind of like that Hegelian dialect and compromise. So maybe that's what he's going for. Maybe it isn't.
Maybe. I mean, he's done one good thing, I will say that, and he's got people talking about it. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. Me personally, I think, like Camilla Harris, he should be more onto the idea of the prison reform in itself, rather than actually going on, well, prisoners should get rights to vote. Because we all agree that prisoners should have some rights. But we also agree that some prisoners shouldn't have rights while they're in prison. So what level of rights are allowed to have and what rights are they not allowed to have? that's where the conversation is, isn't it? That's the interesting part of it. I think the more that we take away identity politics from this, the more that we take away the fact of, oh, Bernie Sanders said this or Trump said that, the more that we look at the actual policies themselves and analyze the actual policies and try to find more common ground, which means you need to start doing some more of that, mate. You know, you did.
I agree. No, the time has come. I've been lazy and trolly, so
you know, that's a funny thing. You know, the way we treat our prisoners is partly as a result of identity politics. We see here in America, we see criminals as criminal scum, irredeemable monsters. We don't see them as our fellow man who has fallen on hard times, or
we've historically been fairly dehumanizing to folks within the prison population.
Yeah, and do we see that having any tangible benefit towards improving their state of being, their ability to get back into the workforce? I've heard there's a guy named Kyle Curtis on the Non Sequitur show. He was sent to prison for a year for drug possession, and after he got out of prison, part of his sentence was paying back the debt he accumulated for using the private prison services he had there. And if he doesn't pay that debt, he goes back to jail. We've got a system so entirely biased and working against our former criminals that you essentially force them back into criminality after they get out.
And this is one of those things that I've noticed. Even if let's say somebody falls upon hard luck, and I'll give you a personal example myself. Like, I lost a job, and I'm like, all right, I got some money saved up and everything. And this was right around probably like 2008, 2009, right as the economy was starting to kind of go off the edge of a cliff. And it's like, oh crap, there doesn't seem to be a lot of work around. Oh crap, I'm now out of my savings. Oh, this sucks. I went on unemployment for a little while, and I went on it, and they're like, oh, just fill this out. Or then each Monday or whatever you call, or Tuesday, whatever it was, and then you'll get your check. I'm like, that's it? They're like, that's it. I'm like, oh. I mean, if all I need to do is just say that I looked this, I'm like, oh, okay. But then again, I was out there. I was looking for work because you need to do like so many places a week. So I did that. I was offered a job at one point, and then I factored in, I'm like, all right, my commute with my V8 Explorer at the time, along with how much I'd be getting, I'm like, I make more money on unemployment. I'm like, no wonder folks don't work, because I'm like, if it's going to cost you more money than you're getting to actually work, what's the incentive there? And because the way it's often set up is, it's even hard to even just get like a part-time job, even at a McDonald's or wherever it may be, just kind of like an entry-level job, wherever it is. To get that job, it takes away, plus you're using additional resources to commute there. Whereas if we kind of had a system where it's like, all right, you're going to get your benefits for so long, and then as you get out there, you're able to work. Maybe you can actually save up that nest egg to maybe put a down payment on an apartment, to actually try to like maybe get yourself like a decent commuting vehicle or something like that. Basically, the ability to actually advance so that once you're stable, you don't necessarily need those benefits anymore. So kind of just a weaning off, if you would. That's something we don't do as well as I believe we could here in the States. It's kind of an all or nothing thing, which kind of perpetuates the system.
Sure. I mean, do they not have, what do you call them? Not warrant officers, because they're fucking bounty hunters, basically. Do you not have parole officers?
No, probation officers? Oh, yeah.
Right.
Do they help you find work?
Oh, God. They make sure you're obeying your probation, and if they sense that you're screwing up in any sort of way, they throw you back into the slammer.
Yeah, okay. I mean, is there no... I mean, we have in our country probation officers that do help you find work and somewhere to live.
We have that more separated. That would be more of like a social worker that would help you specifically, where the parole officer is kind of like usually checks in like once a week or whatever it may be, just to make sure that you're not like fleeing the state, the country, and just check in, make sure everything's kind of all right. It sounds like in the UK, your system is more set up where the same person who you would check in would also be assisting you with kind of getting your life together, which sounds like a good thing to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the social workers that will help them as well, but it's more of the fact that the probation officer uses contacts and so on and so forth and uses the systems to be able to help people getting back to work. But as much as I would like that to happen in the US and everything else like that, I still don't see how that would have been anything to do with the voters' rights. Because don't get me wrong, we can speak about the reform of prisons and what should happen and what shouldn't happen, but I thought that that should be a different stream rather than a stream about prisoners getting a right to vote.
Right. And I think a lot of people that are likely supporting this, a lot of that probably comes from at least the perception, if not actuality, that there do seem to be skewed results within the justice system, and whatever the factors that there might be for that. My main thing is, okay, if we're seeing data and we don't like the data, why is the data the way it is? What are perhaps contributing factors? Because I feel like far too often we try to treat the symptoms of something that's not necessarily the underlying condition. Because if we can actually treat the underlying condition, then the symptoms should naturally remedy themselves, if that makes any sense.
No, I completely understand. I mean, it's like an illness. You don't treat a cold by taking headache tablets. You have to take your rest and whatnot and any other sort of aspects that you need to do.
Oh
So,
yeah, there's like simply educating people would solve so many societal ills. Having kids out of wedlock or too many kids. Having them be having the parents be educated. They'll just naturally have less kids. Among other benefits. There's so many like weird little things or weird big things you can do that just have a crescendo effect of solving so many issues. Getting rid of the drug war. You'll end not just problems here in America, but you'll end problems in Mexico and South America, where where the cartels have like an incredible stranglehold on everything. But suddenly you get rid of drug war, you get rid of their ability to produce income, and suddenly they're just going to collapse, and you're going to have actual law and order come back.
No, I mean, I completely not agree with you. There are definitely certain circumstances that should be changed, and there's certain aspects of laws that should be changed, and everything else like that. I think one of the most important things that you could do, and I don't know if this happens in the US or not, because I'm not as queued up as I would like to be, but in the UK, we have systems where you can do forms of apprenticeships while you're in the prison, so you can learn how to become maintenance or engineering or stuff like that. You could also do GCSEs, basically your equivalent of a high school diploma. You could do all that sort of stuff, and you can do some basic forms of higher learning. I think if you were to put that into at least state prisons, because private prisons would force you to pay for the fucking thing afterwards. If you were to put that into state prisons, then you would naturally educate the people that are already in the prisons, and you'd give them more of an aspect of getting higher level work. And as Meme said, if you've got more of an education, and as you said, you're going to be able to get more work, which then stops the cycle. Most people that go into prison don't do it because they want to do it. Most, not all, some people do, but most people don't go into prison because they want to. Most people go into prison because they had to. So if you take away the had, you take away the prison population. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to have the people that want to.
Yeah, I think there is a system kind of like what you are describing, but it's not one that it's not as emphasized as, say, just putting the prisoners to work, working for well below minimum wage.
Well, that's because we still have legal slavery in the United States. The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery.
Means fuck off. You can't.
Except
means fuck off. You can't be a
under.
slave if you're being paid by definition.
It is.
I'm just saying it's still on the books. We need to dramatically increase the restrictions on slavery within these United States of America.
Means slavery means that you're getting paid nothing. At this point in time, if prisoners are doing work and they are getting paid something, by definition, they are not slaves. You can moan about how much they're getting paid, but you can't call it slavery.
I'm just saying, still on the books.
It is effective slavery because that
No, it's
money,
not.
that money is taken to pay for their stay at the private prison, so they don't see the money anyways.
Sure. I'm not saying that they do or they don't, mate. But the point is that they are getting paid. By definition, they are not slaves.
Yeah, that they are slaves.
No, they're not, because they're getting paid.
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
No, there's no nuance. The definition. No. There's no nuance. There's no nuance because by definition, to be a slave, you need to not be paid.
Not really.
Look at the definition.
You're looking at it's a system where you can either work or you get tossed into solitary confinement, or you're put into a mountain of debt after you get out of jail, or you're given like demerits where you're not given certain freedoms that you would otherwise have if you actually did work.
Under the third definition of its noun, according to Google, so you can take that for whatever it's worth. Condition compared to that of a slave in respect or exhausting labor or restricted freedom. Again, that's the third definition under Google. There, you can take that for what it's worth. I understand what you're saying. If somebody's receiving some form of compensation, but then again, we do also in current vernacular use the term third world slavery, basically people being paid extremely low wages for something that we would consider here by our standards.
I'm not saying it's a bad it's not a bad thing that they do. I'm not saying it's not a bad thing. It is a bad thing, but to call it slavery is not correct.
The conditions under that these prison workers are facing and actual slavery is so similar.
Are you seriously considering comparing the fucking prison service to how slaves were back in the day? Are you seriously considering comparing the two?
Yes.
Then you're a fucking idiot, my friend. They are not being whipped. They are not being forced into servitude. They are not being forced not to be paid or anything else like that. They are not being beaten to an inch of their life.
Being paid has little to do with whether or not you're a slave. I mean, there's slaves that were given.
You're comparing the conditions. You're comparing the conditions of prisoners with slaves. That's your point. You're trying to say that their conditions are similar. They are nowhere near the fucking same.
No, they are quite similar.
Explain how. Explain how a person that is being forced to live in a house with no running water, no liquids, no nothing, being forced to being beaten and then whipped and everything else like that, and possibly shot and killed and being owned is anywhere near equivalent to the prison day service. I'm not trying to say, by the way, people, that the prison service is amazing and it's the best thing ever, but the equivalency does not matter.
It is quite equivalent because your freedom is restricted. You're not treated.
Not because you were bought or owned, because you broke the law.
And you're handed off to a private prison system.
Yes, because you broke the law.
I think that was how some people became slaves back in the day too.
You mean indebted servitude? Yes, I understand the difference means, but he's comparing people that were born into slavery is anywhere near equivalent to the prison service. Again, I am not defending the prison service as an amazing thing, but saying that slavery of the 1400s or whenever is anywhere near equivalent to what it is in the prison service is just an idiotic statement. Yes, there are massive problems.
No, you have the same level of freedom removal, and you're also being forced to work. Otherwise, you get all these even, greater restrictions to your freedoms now or after you get out of jail.
I still can't believe that you're comparing this one, my friend. I just still can't believe that you're comparing the situation and the conditions of the actual conditions of slavery and how they're treated to how prisoners are treated.
Yeah, the prisoners are treated almost as bad, if not sometimes worse.
Really? You'd say that prisoners are treated worse than slaves?
In some instances.
So they're whipped and beaten nowadays, are they? To an inch of their life, with scars going down their backs and balls being chopped off and bones being broken and all that.
That's it. That's the exception to the rule of slavery. You cannot have a slave force that can pick cotton for you efficiently if they're recovering from wounds.
You do realize that happened a hell of a lot, where people were whipped and then forced to work there in 2 to 3 days afterwards.
Yeah, I'm
You
aware
realize
that happened,
don't you?
but I'm also aware that that's not the rule for every slave. They always pick an example to do the worst thing that they can do, and then as a show to all the other slaves to get in line.
Sure, they may have done it in that particular way.
Well, I mean,
Show me where they do that today.
solitary confinement.
That's actually, I believe, been utilized as certain military punishments as well. I mean, that may have been used as a slave punishment. And again, have there been a number of atrocities during the bondage of people in the country's history? Yes, there have been numerous of those things happen. Does that encompass every single? Because as far as I know, there were some individuals that weren't. They were still chattel. Absolutely, they were still in bondage. But I do not believe every single one of them was treated to that extent. To what extent that happened, I have no idea. I wasn't there. But at the same time, within the prison system, while we like to believe we've come a long way and everything, there are also horrific incidents that do happen in a prison. And again, that's why I say very often we argue semantics scale, and kind of the sheer fact that it sounds like in a way we're kind of trying to take away from slavery and actually maybe even defend it. I mean that makes me feel uncomfortable. I'll just be straight up about that. But no. And again, we're kind of diverging from the initial topic as well. And actually, I think Cult, if you're around at some point, maybe we could have an actually topic on this and the fact that slavery is still actually on the books in the United States, because that is a discussion I have had a couple of with folks, but I would actually like to have a broadcast as along with you as well, CSG, depending on your availability, because I do think this is an issue. The sheer fact that we even still have it on books, just from even a mimetic standpoint. I mean, we're the freaking United States of America. Come on, we still have slavery on the books, even if it's in a very subjective thing. But as far as the general topic, as far as voting rights go, I think this is going to become very interesting, because I do also err on, if we do deem some individuals that are convicted felons to be a danger to society, kind of like when Styx was bringing up the whole kind of principle of a lunatic, basically the individual whom has a high likelihood, as we have deemed it, to be a danger to themselves or someone else, we strip them of a right under the Bill of Rights. So I think it might be something more similar to that, of what is the particular level of offense of a felony in which we should restrict somebody from voting even after they have served their debt to society, as well as with the individuals whom have committed a crime, who are currently in jail. Should we afford them rights, and then whom within there should we afford those rights to, if at all?
Sure. No, I completely and utterly agree. I think we kind of covered that topic, where we basically said anybody that's a felon. I think that's a broad enough statement to be able to go through. Misdemeanors, not so much, obviously, but I think the broad statement of people that are felons, probably while they're serving their time, shouldn't have the right to vote, in my opinion.
Yeah, I personally see no convincing reason why to deny them that right. And if I don't see a good reason to, I always default towards more freedom, because if we have to justify why we have rights or why we're allowed these freedoms, then they're not really freedoms or rights; they're privileges.
Okay, so what level would you go to where people can't vote or shouldn't vote? Where's your cutoff point?
Uh murderers, pedophiles, the worst, the most offensive white collar crimes,
Why do
treason.
why do white collar crimes come into that aspect?
Because they are crimes with potentially the most damage, actually. A murderer can murder one person at a time, or 50 people all at once, but a a policy decision by a secretary of war, or a decision to raise the price on a certain pharmaceutical can potentially kill hundreds, thousands, millions.
Sure, but that's not what white collar crime is. If a
That
pharmaceutical company,
but that's an example of you know like what Bernie Madoff did, defrauded $60 billion out of people. How many
sure,
of those are people with put in their entire life savings into something? How many of those people are people you're have had who would need surgery or something like that? Those
sure,
people could die or be severely injured, affected for the rest of their lives.
sure, I completely agree. What happens if you kept your money in your house and I come and nicked your money, sorry, in your house, and you've lost all your savings? Does that count as a crime where I should be put into prison and lose my right to vote?
Say that again. You kind of broke up for me.
Sorry, no, that's fine, no problem. If you were to keep your life savings in a safe in your house or somewhere in your house, and I broke in and I found your savings and I nicked your savings in your house, does that mean because I've nicked your life savings that I should then go to prison and lose my right to vote because I've nicked your life savings?
Eh,
Well, see, that's one of those things where, because it's the question ends up coming, it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, where do we draw the lines? And that's obviously
Exactly.
complicated, or at least if you're going to try to encompass millions and millions of folks and individual actions, that's hard. Even just from scalability.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to create a standard that's well, that's 100% consistent and accounts for every situation. I think every case should be given consideration. Understand the nuance of the situation.
Okay. What about if we just say that all felons that are in prison for over a year for any sort of crime cannot vote for why they're in service or in servitude?
That's kind of tossing nuance to the wind.
Why is it? If people are in prison for over a year or incarcerated for over a year, generally their crimes would be something that is considered worthy of losing their right to vote for that period of time.
So,
Surely.
so could a lot of this, if we were going to take that route, let's entertain this idea of CSG, could that not be made better by perhaps taking certain things that we classify as felonies and maybe changing them around a bit? And maybe some felonies should be more serious. Perhaps other things that we currently consider to be as felonies should be, in fact, misdemeanors. I mean, again, it depends on the particular situation and what we're deeming it as. It's just, again, we are a constitutional republic over here. So basically, we are made up of the individual states. And that's why I tend to be a big states' rights guy, in that basically let the states kind of work it out, and over time we tend to kind of all go in the same direction. If there is a major injustice or something, yes, these are things that we work out, but typically I think it's usually more productive to do it from the state level, because if the state doesn't necessarily agree with whatever federal legislation comes by, they might see that as potentially a form of oppression on their point. Whereas if it comes organically, they might not like it, but since it was on a more localized level, folks are more willing to be accepting of it.
Sure. I mean, let's take, for instance, the examples that we've already used. I mean, I completely and utterly agree with you, by the way, but that's something that I think should be left up to the legislators rather than us trying to decide subjectively what crime constitutes what level of punitive action. But let's entertain the idea, as you said. Let's take the example of Bernie Sanders or whoever that embezzled money out of everybody, and then comparing that to somebody who's taken the life savings of one individual. Say, for instance, that we decided that the person who's embezzled money off of countless people, or obviously a number of people, because we can quantify the number, obviously. So let's say that they've embezzled money off of quite a few people, say, I don't know, 100, compared to the person that's only done the one. What gives the right of that person that say has only done one compared to the person that's done 100, bar the amount of people that they've done it to? So in other words, are we only discriminating on how many people that the crime has been perpetrated against, or are we perpetrating the are we understanding what the crime is rather than actually how many people it's been done to?
Could you like type that question into the chat, because you were breaking up really bad.
Sorry, is this a bit better?
No, I think it has to deal with your internet connection, because your video feed tends to go from just bad to like really, really pixelated.
Let's see if that works a little bit better then.
Yeah, that should save on your bandwidth.
Yeah. So the question that I was trying to say was, if we have somebody that's embezzled money off of 100 or 50 people, and we have somebody that's nicked one person's life savings through theft, but we've decided that theft doesn't warrant you losing the vote, or losing a vote, should we say? But the person who's embezzled over 50 people or 100 people's money, that does. Surely there would be a case in law where the person that's embezzled 100 people could say, well, you're only discriminating against me by how many people I've done it to, and saying that the actual law only states by how many people I've done it to and not the crime.
Yeah, you're doing it based on the severity of the crime.
No,
I mean, if you steal money from 100 people versus one, that's automatically 100 times worse your crime is.
Well, doesn't this kind of go into the whole, like, if you're going to have some form of a system, and I just forgot my point. Go on.
No, the thing that I was going to say was, the reason why I've said it in that particular way is because the crime is the same, but it's a non-violent crime. Now, don't get me wrong. If you killed one person, you should be done for that one person. If you can kill 10 people, then you should be done for those 10 people. But if you've embezzled money off of one person, the crime is still the same as embezzling over 100 people. It's still embezzlement.
Well, right. Okay, no, I remember my point. We kind of had that codified by the dollar amount, I believe, to rob somebody of money or property in excess of $250. I believe that's considered a felony. They may have raised it to $500, but I at least know in some states back in the day, that's where you went from a misdemeanor to something. So that's why, like, if you stole some gum, okay, maybe you go to jail. They give you the slap on the wrist, but you were doing just basic shoplifting of kind of smaller goods. However, if you're trying to roll out a shopping cart with a brand new flat screen TV, that's something more likely to be a felony, just because the TV is probably going to have a lot greater value than a stack of gum on average, of course.
Sure. Okay. So that's the level of what the felony is.
So yeah. So basically, we go by dollar amount, I believe.
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, the point that I was trying to make in this instance is, what do you necessarily call a felony? Because if it's just that one, but you've obviously explained that it's to do with the dollar amount, which is absolutely fine. The point that I was honestly trying to make was, What levels of crime do we go for? What do we reclassify as felonies? What do we classify as misdemeanors? Because we could classify $251, for instance, as not being a felon anymore. And we could classify the other one as. It all depends on what the circumstantials and subjective legislation is.
Oh, right. So there's definitely some nuance in there as well as it brings up the perhaps we should occasionally go back and maybe revisit some laws, like the sheer fact that a donkey cannot sleep in somebody's bathtub in Arizona, I think is highly offensive, and I think we should go back and review that law.
Wait, that's a law?
That
Yeah,
is
it
a
is.
law.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wow. I think that's actually even dumber than Ted Cruz's dildo ban.
Well, the law came, I think it was like in 1876 or a 1912 ruling or something, because it was somebody had like found a donkey and they kind of claimed it as it was a localized law, but it is still currently law on the books nonetheless.
Yeah, it's very hard once law is on place to be able to change the law and get it back off of the books again. But that's the point, though. We're now trying to ascertain or trying to put together what we think is punitive crimes to lose a vote now, rather than just having a blanket statement of all felons should not have the vote for the time that's served. We're now picking and choosing ourselves what we perceive the crimes to be voted against. And my overall point was, as I said to memes before, that means that you're discriminating against the different crimes. Now, we all agree that there are certain crimes that are just universally not accepted. We all agree on that, obviously. But there comes to the point of the subjective severity of the crimes and where that line is drawn. And that's the problem that I have. Because once we start selectively, subjectively as well, deciding what law is now good enough to lose a vote and what isn't, we then go into discrimination of the person who's having different laws. Like, what's the difference between the person who nicks $250 to the person who nicks $251?
Well, that $1.
Well, exactly. That's the difference in that aspect. That classifies that as a misdemeanor and that to a felony.
Yeah, the American legal system is one that lacks a severe amount of nuance. I mean, it purposely avoids nuance.
No,
Well,
we're suggestively trying to ascertain ourselves what we think constitutes as a crime that makes you lose your vote. We all agree that there should be some crimes that don't lose the vote, and we all agree that there should be crimes that do lose their vote. But where's that bit in the middle? And as we're talking about it, we might want to expand upon it.
well, CSG, I mean, come on. We got two dudes in the US and one dude from the UK right now. So obviously we're a representative sample about what would make sense for the entire United States of America. And going off your point right there about somewhat of the middle ground, rather than just having a misdemeanor or a felony, should we have something more in the middle? Let's say perhaps a third category, kind of maybe, I don't know, as Red Foreman may say, the category dumbass. And again, this is just a thought experiment here. That's not what we should actually call it, but you get the thing where it's somebody does something, they fucked up, they realize they fucked up, we realize they fucked up. So it's kind of like somewhere between a misdemeanor and a felony where it's like, all right, you were a dumbass, you're going to do your time. However, we're going to make sure that you are afforded certain rights and that upon your completion, you can have all your rights. And maybe this is a better thing, just a little third category in there. Call that, well, we're not that bad or whatever it is. I just love the Red Foreman mimetic of somebody screws up and it's like, dumbass.
I think that's a beautiful title or label for that category, dumbass.
It's going to offend a bunch of people, so of course you're going to need to. Because let's face it, it's like you say I'm a felon, or someone's like I'm a dumbass. It's like even though we know that the felony is the more serious one, having to force somebody to call someone a dumbass again, this was a joke. I think. Well, I mean, if I was in the UK, I'd probably be arrested. But
Oh yeah, there is that.
Oi, where's your joke license?
Fuck, I don't have one. But to go back to your point, I do think that there are distinctions that can be made. And I do think that there are differences. Obviously, as you all have said, there are nuances. I hate that fucking word, but there are nuances to it. And I do agree that there are different levels. But the point that I'm trying to get through at this point in time, and I know it doesn't matter because we're not going to change anything, and I know that it's all subjective to what our points of view are anyway. But if we're going to go down the thought experiment of saying that we think that some people should have rights and some people shouldn't, maybe us as subjectively as we're talking at this moment in time should have an idea of what we're trying to suggest or implement.
Yes, yes. No trolling in the side chat at all. So, but yeah, no, and that's the thing there. And I do really appreciate that, CSG. No, there is nuance to this. It's just a lot of times people often don't speak up for whatever reason because either they want to avoid conflict or maybe they don't necessarily want to get in trouble or go against a particular community they're a part of. But it's just when something does happen to something that's near and dear to their heart, a person they care about or themselves personally, those are often issues that they speak up on. And you know what? We need to hear those stories so we can avoid injustice. Will we do that perfectly? No. We're human beings. We're perfectly imperfect creatures. I stand by, like I think everyone in this chat and everyone that's watching, that I think we can do better. We can disagree upon how to achieve those goals, but that's the whole Hegelian dialect thing. We work through it. We take the good ideas wherever they may come from, and we implement them the best we can to the best of our ability to provide for a better future.
No worries. That didn't answer my question, though.
Oh, I forgot you asked the question. I just started bloviating.
I gathered you pontificated past my point. But yeah, I was trying to say that subjectively, we've all decided that there are differences and nuances in this situation. So why don't we try? And I'm not saying that what you're going to say is correct, and I'm not going to say what I'm going to say is correct. But if we're having the differences and we're having the conversation, why don't we try to distinguish what that line is rather than just saying there is a line?
Because humans are messy.
Agreed, which is why we have a blanket law.
Well, messy can be good.
No, but that's what my point was. We're trying to change what already mostly and not completely, and there are flaws, but we are trying to change what does work, and we're not trying to explain how we're going to make it better. So,
I mean, does it work?
Yes, blanket bans on having the vote taken away from felons works. Yes.
I mean, we have the system in place, but does it work in making our society a better?
Does it make it a worse society? Does it make it a worse society?
I'd argue yes. You have less people being franchised. You got less people being able to have a voice in our political system.
Okay, fine. Now explain where the line should be.
And we get into the mess.
Yeah.
That's the point that I'm trying to make. At the moment, there are flaws with the system. I am not disputing that there are none in the system, but the system as an overall works. So you're suggesting that we should change the system. How do we change the system to the better, and where's the line to change it?
I'm not a lawyer. We can we're not policy makers. We can argue. We can.
I'm not saying you are. I'm not. And just a second, I just wanted to say that I'm not suggesting that any of you, including myself, are policymakers. We are having a conversation between free plebeians. I don't even live in your country. I cannot decide for you what you can and cannot do. But the point is, you two are suggesting that there should be a line. That point that I'm trying to make is your subjective idea of where that line should be hinders and connotates where your point is. So where should that line be under your impression? Not the fact that you are going to decide what the policy is, but in your interpretation and your impression, where should it be?
Let me pose this question to you, CSG. If we did a blanket like Senator Sanders sounds like he was proposing of reinstating the voting rights of all felons, even while they're serving their time, do you think that would take away from society? And if so, in what way?
Yes, because then it takes away of the fact that when you commit a crime, you lose your rights and you are being punished for the crime that you've done. I also believe that there should be rehabilitation, but you do need to be punished for the crime you commit.
Well, they serve their time.
You are.
Exactly. You serve your time, and while you serve your time, you don't have the right to vote as forms of punishment.
That's why I said, is it going to break the country?
It's not going to break the country, no, but it is going to give the same rights to prisoners.
Okay, that's what the argument is. It's again like they are to be punished for their crimes and serving their debt to society. However, while serving their debt to society, especially if they are a United States citizen, if they have the right to vote, how will that make the country worse, potentially having more people heard?
I'm being very, very honest with you guys, and I'm trying to explain my point of view very, very well as I possibly can. But obviously, I'm losing something here. The point that I'm trying to make is why you are serving your time, why you have broken your social contract with society, and you're being punished for breaking that social contract. You don't have the same rights when you are following that social contract.
Well,
We've all agreed that felons lose some rights.
Well,
Why-
they lose their liberty, their freedom.
they lose those rights based off of being able to house them in a prison and protect the safety of them and those around them.
Sure, I completely and utterly agree. But
How does denying the right to vote, how does allowing them the right to vote make them, less safe or more difficult to house them?
what do you mean? How does it make it It obviously makes it difficult for them to house them, because for a start, they have to put in voting booths and make sure that people are counting the fucking votes. Which means that
You can do absentee ballots. It's just
As
a
a prisoner,
form you fill out.
you're still allowed to send letters, because I remember I got one from one of my former roommates after he got picked up on a parole violation. So I mean, again, it's kind of like, okay, which rights? You lose your liberty to go out there because you are being confined, and this is again, like CSG. I'm entertaining Senator Sanders' idea as a thought experiment here. Is if you say the system currently works under that, would the system currently not work? Because I mean, if we still have 100+ million folks voting, even if every single one of those felons or individuals who do not currently have the right to vote, if they have the right to vote, I mean, again, they're still going to be voting in their individual states, their districts, and everything as well. They just still will be paying their debt to society due to their loss of freedom.
why did they get that right? Why did they get that right after breaking their social contract? Why did they get that right to vote?
Because they're U.S. citizens.
Then, in that case, give them back the Second Amendment. Give them the fact of being able to walk around and being able to walk around with liberty. Let them be able to walk around again.
That is a fair statement, because if one is going to argue down this route, and you're arguing that you pay your debt to society as long as you still have the right upon removal to then go out there and then bear arms, so it does kind of go down. It's, if anything, it's a very libertarian-ish route, in that you're saying that, okay, you're going to pay your debt to society. What is your minimum debt to society? You are going to be locked up and not allowed to actively participate physically within society. We have retained your right to write letters, and if you want to send in for an absentee ballot, you can do that. The argument here for it would be that since these folks are still allowed to participate in the system, you're going to increase at least their potential franchisement within the system to help try to minimize recidivism rates, because they feel like they're more of an active member of society. At least that's what I see of the argument of being for that as being.
Sure, I'm not saying that it would make them feel more enchanted into what they're trying to do. I'm not saying it wouldn't. The point that I'm making is that when you go to prison, you lose some of your rights. Why are they allowed to have the right to vote if they are being punished for breaking the societal contract?
Why shouldn't they have the right to vote?
Because they broke the societal contract. If they're allowed to have the right to vote, then they're allowed to have all their other rights.
Why are prisoners entitled to I think, is it the Eighth Amendment, where no unusual or no, cruel or unusual punishment. Why are they entitled to that?
Well, that's
right?
why Joe Arpaio, I think, ended up being convicted because of the whole how he was treating prisoners and stuff like that. That's a separate issue. I'm not necessarily sure that's the best application of that cult, just because the cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, realistically, I mean, Europe has done stuff like this, at least in the past, even in, I think, the Roman Empire and stuff, because somebody had brought up the fact that slaves could vote in the Roman Empire. I looked into that, at least according to the Wikipedia article on it, of course, take that for what you will. It said that slaves that were freed had the right to vote. However, slaves that at the time were deemed to be, they used a particular word for it, but basically perhaps more violent or something like that, they were under a different class where they did lose the potential right to vote.
I'm making the point that prisoners are entitled to some rights.
Yeah, they are. They're allowed to have their life and liberty, as in as much as they're afforded while they're locked up. That doesn't mean that they're entitled to the right to vote.
Why not?
Just asking why not does not point out the question. The point is that they are losing their rights. You're trying to advocate that they should have that right. So make the point. You can't prove a negative.
The issue I think we're running into here, CSG, and I actually found this basically the societal dead man or something that was going on in Roman society, where basically if you were deemed as somebody that was like socially dead, you didn't have any like civil or personal rights or anything like that. Technically, since you were outside the law, somebody could literally just kill you. That's not the case we're talking about right here. What we're talking about right here is if somebody is a citizen of the United States, under basically if somebody's going to pay their debt to society, what counts as paying your debt to society? Is it specifically your physical removal from society, in that you lose your liberty of basically able to physically move about as you would? Is that it, or does it go further than that physical loss of liberty, in that you also lose your ability to elect your representative members while you're still serving? Because at least, and I do like that word enchantment, I'm going to use that more. Basically, if you could more positively enchant folks, and I mean, again, there would be some that would argue, oh, well, folks will vote in their self-interest. It's like, well, duh. I mean, people do that all the time.
Of course they do, but I'm not arguing that they should be able to vote or they shouldn't be able to vote. I'm voting. I'm suggesting that because they are prisoners and because they have broken laws, they should not get the right to vote while they are serving.
Aren't we just kind of labeling them as other people then?
No, we're not labeling them as other people. No, hang on. No. We are not labeling them as other people. We are labeling them as convicts, as criminals that have been convicted of crimes.
So they're limited people.
At that minute in time, because they have broken the law and possibly killed people and possibly done other heinous crimes, yes, memes.
Or done as little as just smoking a little bit of marijuana.
There are aspects in the laws where we could change. But I'm not suggesting that overall everybody should get the vote. You are.
I'm arguing that we should default towards freedom, unless otherwise there's some reason why we should.
I understand that, and I'm explaining the reasons, but you two do not want to accept those reasons, but they are the reasons.
Well, I think we're arguing upon where's that point, because if we're going to make the more libertarian argument of, well, where do your rights end? Your rights end where another person's rights begin. Where in this mess of things is that line?
Sure. Let me just quickly pose a question to you.
Sure.
If I infringe on your right, should I or should I not be punished?
Well, it depends. Yeah. I mean, I might ask you to please stop.
No. If I infringe on your rights, not I'm going to, or I'm thinking about it, if I have.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily need crimes that are committed are not always prosecuted as well.
Well, what purpose does denying someone the right to vote while they're in prison serve?
The point is to prove the fact that they are not part of society while they are paying back their societal debt for breaking crimes.
I mean, doesn't them being in prison prove that point far enough?
No, because if you still got all of your animal rights, all you're doing is being locked up and looked after in a particular place, which means more people that are, should we say, institutionalized would like to go to prison because, they have the same rights.
Well, that would be a very interesting thing, because at that point, so what happens if we deem this, and again, I would say the right to vote would be maybe more fundamental than having HBO. I mean, OJ, when he was locked up, I mean, he did complain about that for a while. I think they may have gotten HBO at one point, but that's another thing. But what happens if it's like, all right, if you have the ability to do some work, and if you are potentially receiving uh, basically free lodging and stuff, and you could just play around the internet and shit post and do what we're doing right now, like that. I mean, it's like, the crazy thing is, I think a lot of folks kind of, if technically we're going to go by the definition of you are basically not allowed to move about freely, a lot of folks are kind of choosing that by themselves. Like, I know I've been locked up in my room for far too long periods of time, but that was my personal choice.
Sure. Still,
No,
but
that's why it's an interesting thought experiment, because you play it
Not
out, you're like,
particularly.
ooh.
Not particularly. The reason why it's not an interesting thought experiment is because no matter how long you stay in your room, you always have the chance of leaving. But if you've broken the law and broken your social contract and need to be, as you guys would say, rehabilitated at least, then you need to go to a particular facility to be able to do so, don't you?
Well, that's right. It's your loss of your choice.
Exactly. It's your loss of choice. And what's a bigger choice than being able to vote?
I don't know. Is that one of the choices that should be lost?
Yes.
Why?
The reason why it should be lost is because you have broken your social contract and you are a felon at that point in time. You are a convict. You have been convicted of committing a crime.
The argument for that cult would be kind of along the lines of the whole like Second Amendment thing, where basically if somebody is deemed as being dangerous to themselves or someone else in society, even though we do have the Second Amendment, there are certain restrictions we may be placed on upon an individual for, and I hate saying these terms, the quote unquote greater good of society. We should be wary of the greater good, but that's the general kind of reason why we do that. So if we're going to hold it to the same standard, under what circumstances should we deem a person to lose their right to vote under a similar, it could be potentially dangerous to themselves or society? So like, as I'm speaking those words, I'm realizing, yes, there's definitely differences between the situation. However, it could also be argued if they're voting for policies that could potentially hurt other folks, and that's why I do think it is a very nuanced conversation, just because there's so many different examples that could be cited for this, that, or the other thing.
Sure.
I don't know what else have we got, man.
Well, that's the point, though, isn't it? I mean, we keep on going to the same point. We think that there are definitely certain citizens that lose their right to vote. Let me pose a different question to you, because we keep on going down to where it should be cut off. Why should the people, in your opinion, lose their right to vote just because they're a paedophile or a murderer, if you don't think that other people should?
Honestly, it could be just more of an emotional reaction for me.
Okay.
Because I see, being a murderer, or I mean, there's people who say that pedophile. I mean, there's a lot of people who believe that, being a pedophile or a rapist is, a much worse crime than being a murderer, despite the fact that as a murderer you've actually taken someone's life permanently. It also could be just, this an emotional, I feel this crime is worse, so
Is that a good way of thinking, then? That using your emotional aspects of your brain to dictate policy, is that a good idea?
Most of the time, no, but sometimes it could be.
Is it a good idea in this aspect?
I don't know.
Okay, at least you're honest. That's not a problem. What about you, then, Memes?
That is a very no, the way Ham was going right there. Just for a quick maybe thought on that is that at the same time, if we are going to make the argument, because we do also kind of got to hold society together. So if all of a sudden, if you're not necessarily punishing people for crimes that are absolutely abhorrent to folks within the citizenry, if they feel like injustice is not being done, then again, you need to have that societal cohesion there. Where do a person's rights end? Where do another person's rights begin there? I don't know, man. I don't know. You would need to look at a very large amount of data to have some form of that actual line. And I feel like even if as human beings we try to do that, we're going to kind of gerrymander it in a way as well, which is why, I don't know, I forget who brought it up, but that perhaps maybe a third classification rather than just having just the current binary of either misdemeanors or felonies may or may not work. Oh, a wild ogre has appeared.
Before Ogre does come in and say everything.
Quick question. Is there anyone in this hangout that doesn't have a beard?
You.
No, I got
know you have. I can see your picture.
No, I got a thick ass beard. That Brett Keen's beard. No, God no.
Well, before Ogre kicks in and everything else like that, I just wanted to pick up on Mean's point. Through all the pontificating that you just did, can you please answer the question? Where do you think that they should lose their rights compared to other people that should keep their rights? As this is your argument.
Oh, I have no idea.
So is it similar to what Cult of Ham was saying, that it's an emotional appeal?
Could that be a factor? Sure, that could be a factor. Is the best way to go about things? No, because you want to factor in so many different things. And again, if you're going to try to keep it as simple as possible, is this particular action going to harm themselves, another person, or society? And that ends up being very difficult, because I mean, if we're talking about voting, man, and if you refer to it as kind of like a free speech thing, it's like, if you're going to earn free speech, it's like, all right, you do that with the exception of, again, you yell fire in a crowded theater, and there's a high likelihood of people physically being injured. I don't know if giving someone the right to vote necessarily meets that standard. That's why it's something that's kicking around in my head, and that's why I loved having this conversation. What up, brother?
Oh, that Brett Keen's beard. No, God no.
Before Ogre kicks in and everything else like that, I just wanted to pick up on somebody may have their stream going on.
Oh man, I was trying to simulcast. I heard you tell me to wait a second, so I'm waiting. But I was
You're
doing
fine
my
to go
best,
ahead
dude.
now, mate.
I was busting my balls to simulcast. I was broadcasting because I got on and I seen you were on started over 2 hours ago, and I thought, I didn't even look. I thought, oh, Common Sense Guy's done now. I start my stream. I started a stream, and somebody was like, oh, Common Sense Guy's doing something. And you know me, Common Sense, I warm up with music. So I was like, well, fucking. And then I told you right away, for anybody that was like, because somebody, I think RPR was like, are you eavesdropping? I was like, nope. As soon as I started broadcasting, I sent in your side chat. I was like, you're live. And I think there was some confusion. I made it very clear you're live on my channel. But anyway, I couldn't set it up. For some reason, I couldn't get in this microphone that I'm tap. You can.
It's within the audio properties. I was messing around with like OBS trying to
hear out of this one, but you can hear out of this one now. That's fucking weird, because that's broadcasting through my other computer and then into my soundboard. So it
come on, Mr. Ogre. You used to be a cable guy. Just all these multiple setups.
Dude, I've never tried to make computers talk to each other. I've never tried to make computers talk to each other with audio. I've never done it. But let me say something very quick. I got a couple questions. If I may ask you a couple questions. I'd just like to ask you a couple questions of you and Memes. It's much more important than what you all are trying to talk about right now. I'd like to ask a couple questions of you, genus seeming lefty lunatics. Memes, if you're going to let them vote, shouldn't they have their Second Amendment right? Because the only argument you have to let them vote is their sacred franchise in this country. That's the only, and that's not even enshrined well, it's not so much enshrined in the Bill of Rights. So where do you end? I heard you talking about some cable and shit. Now listen, I think they should have cable TV, HBO, everything else. Why? Because I've been in jail for a couple days and I don't want them to be tortured. But the right to vote, very quickly, boys, before I just kick it over, because man, I've been listening to my brother for about 40 minutes just defend the most crazy, infantile nonsense I've ever heard. The only reason anybody would espouse it is because their God, Bernie Sanders, said it. That's the only reason. There's no other logical reason that anyone in their fucking right mind would say, okay, everything else that the jailers have to do, now they've got to get the boys in line, give them ballots, and let them vote. Are you fucking kidding me? They don't give them pencils, you fucking morons. They give them what they're called silly sticks. They give them the little inside of your pen. You pull your pen apart, and you got the inside with a little flex. They call them flex pens. They don't give, because they will try to kill you. And now I'm hearing, and now what am I saying? Not all morons, not all. Some of the people are in there, and they didn't even do nothing. They were innocent. But again, I've been in jail. The large majority of them belong there. So anyway, any counter poses that? So no, I have a question, and you all are very kind. Thank you for that time, because man, it was a lot to keep in. I'm trying to work on this. I'm listening to you fuckers, and I'm trying to get the simulcast. I'm like, holy shit, what did he just say? Well, I'm trying to work. And so there you go, boys. If you're going to give him back the right to vote, I just want to stand, because common sense, again, he's not American. I heard everything y'all said. But what he is common sense. How can you fucking argue with, if you put a child molester away, and in Ionia, Michigan, it would be over half the population are prisoners. They call it Prison City in Michigan. So they can elect, they would start electing people that would, you people don't see this, but think about it, please. They would elect people that had just, they would elect it. They would elect themselves out of prison, is what I'm trying to tell you. And if you think I'm stupid, you're stupid. They send drones. They drop drugs. Them fuckers, the people in prison are so crafty that they have them behind block walls with locked doors, and people watch them 24 hours a day with cameras, and they still get crack in there. Are you fucking kidding me?
It seems like they're pretty ingenuous or something.
Yes, and they're where they belong, and they're where they belong, because they did not put their ingenuity to a good use. Memes. You said a lot today. You tried to defend these people a lot today, memes. But the problem is that when they were out there and had their chance to use their ingenuity, they raped, they robbed. A lot of them are Bernie Madoffs. A lot of them are Bernie Madoffs, and hey, they should be in a low security, easygoing prison. But Bernie Madoff should not be in society any more than any other murderer or rapist or robber or thief you can think of.
So let's have a rebuttal from somebody else then. So if Cole Ham or Means wants to go through, then make a rebuttal.
Thank you for your patience, gentlemen.
Oh, no problem, Mr. Roger. There was a lot to digest there, and it was very passionate, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you, with those little silly sticks there, is that enough to fill in an oval?
Oh yeah, but you overlooked the point of that, because I threw that in to the people that watch over them now have to hand out ballots and make up a day. They've already got to let them out 2 hours a day. They got to wipe these boys' asses, because all they're trying to do is game the system that they're in. And maybe, like, again, someone shouldn't be there. Look, I don't want to talk too long, but yes, no, I understand. Yes, they can fill in an oval, memes, but that is disingenuous thing that you're throwing.
You got to have it stationary so they can write them letters.
Right. And actually, to fully address what Mr. Ogre was saying, because I kind of did that as a little sidestep, and that
very, very intelligent. You're good. You're smart. That was good. Good point.
On your Second Amendment comparison, maybe you were listening to a song at the time, but I did kind of bring that up, and
I might.
That is a very questionable.
So would you reiterate that to me then? Because I was doing a lot of things.
Okay, you're gonna have to let Memes talk, mate.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, basically, if you go down this road, as Senator Sanders was saying, you do create the argument that if somebody is convicted of a felony, you know what? Hey, what is to keep us from keeping your firearms from you? What's the argument? The only argument that I can think of off the top of my head is basically, Sticks kind of said, the whole kind of lunatic thing, where if you're going to say, if somebody is going to be in an imminent danger to them, potential imminent danger, high likelihood of that of themselves or other people within society that, okay, that's what we deem as restricting to your right. However, if does giving somebody the right to vote provide some form of actual potential harm to themselves or other people in society?
Yeah.
If you're adjudicated incompetent, memes to address that specifically, if you're adjudicated incompetent, in other words, you're mentally deficient, you cannot vote. You cannot own a firearm. So I don't know the comparison. I miss your comparison there.
Should that be that way?
Yeah.
If someone is mentally you take that one. Yeah, thanks. Take it. Common sense.
Yeah.
You could do it as good as me.
Yes, there should be. Why should they? Sorry. Why should the mentally incapable or incompetent be able to have a gun and be able to vote? That's like trying to say that children should be able to vote. Would you like children to be able to vote?
No.
Or carry a gun?
No.
Well, what
Mentally-
do we define as a child? Just as what does we define as incompetent? If somebody says
Right now we define it as
like,
under 18
you're
names. You know
you're
that.
obviously incompetent, that's probably not a very fair characterization of somebody.
Memes, really, it's 21 here if you want to know the truth, but you can sign a contract, enter into agreement in America at 18. So here we considered 18. I think that's a little crazy. I think 21, which we used here in the United States of America until what, 1950? I think it was a little later than that. And what countries, and then we all went to 18. The reason we went to 18, and the only reason I support it is why, boys? We can all say it in unison, because you can go and be killed by another country when you're 18.
Yep.
And so we said, okay, you can vote.
Rent a car.
And to me, if you can go die, you should also be able to drink. They got it right over there in Great Britain, right? Common sense guy, because you can drink at 16, right? You can go in the pub and have a beer.
No, it has to be 18.
Oh, it is 18 then. But still, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, you'd have to go by, if we're going to go by this mental competency aspects of Avenue, then we have to go to the point of, well, what standard is it? And you're saying that the standard is maybe wrong, maybe correct. I don't know. But the point is that there's a standard. You're trying to argue that there should be a standard for who you decide that should be able to vote and who shouldn't. I've tried arguing
standard, or are we kind of going a bit more the libertarian route? And again, I'll be straight up. Most of this is really just a thought experiment, just because I'm like, as soon as he said that, my initial response was, and I'm like, let the Boston bomber vote. I'm like, but then again, at the same time, another part of me is like, well, I stand for free speech. I mean, isn't the ultimate?
Dude, listen,
memes. At what point should a country take away
free speech here? Memes. We all stand for free speech here. Nobody's trying to say that the people shouldn't have their right to a free speech or free trial or whatever. But what we are saying is that if you commit a crime and you are a convicted felon, then you should lose your right to vote. The reason why you should lose your right to vote, again, is because you have broken the social contract. I can see Ogre wants to come in, so please come in.
Yes, and I want to be a gentleman because everyone here has been a gentleman. So I don't want to just use my voice to thank you for noticing that. But memes, I would say this. What you're doing, sir, I want to pose to you, not tell you what you're doing, but pose to you and have you ponder this. I believe you're empathizing a little too much, my friend. You're putting yourself in that position. You're saying to yourself, what if I? But I would ask you this, memes. Would you hold down a beautiful, buxom 18-year-old co-ed and viciously fucking rape her and beat her half to death? And if the answer is no, then you should vote and you won't be in prison. But if you would do that thing, some things that are worse, some things that I wouldn't even try to describe, some things that are less, but we just don't want this kind of people in our society. I mean, look, now I feel very bad for saying these things because it is a hard thing. But let me tell y'all something. Life is hard.
Yeah, life is very, very hard.
So once somebody crosses into the felonary binary, they become other people.
I think, now let me be clear. I think while they're incarcerated, when they get out, I would love to have that conversation. But while incarcerated, no, I stand right lockstep and shoulder to shoulder with common sense guy because it's simple common sense guy. You don't fucking let people in prison vote. It doesn't happen. It's just because of the basic logistics of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But to quickly get a caveat,
logistics is not difficult. You just hand them absentee ballots.
Man, they would be telling each other what to vote, dude. You have any idea? You really think you can just hand a bunch of prisoners fucking ballots and tell them to vote? If you do it in an all-black cell right now, no white boy would vote for Trump. And you call me a bigot if you want, but you're stupid if you do. If it was in Great Britain, Tommy Robinson wouldn't be voting for fucking what's oh man, I'm having a brain fart. The blonde guy, common sense guy
Boris Johnson.
Yes, he wouldn't be voting for Boris Johnson, would he?
But
He'd
even
vote for Amir Khan.
The majority of Americans don't want to vote for Donald Trump.
Hang on. Even taking it even simpler and taking away politics, let's do it in a way that everybody would understand. Let's talk about the fact of if you had a gang and you knew that gang and you wanted to win your state, you could go to that gang and pay them money to enforce everybody that was in that prison that they controlled to vote for you.
Easy.
And
all right, then they make the ballots you fill out, make them do it in private.
It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. You honestly
There is no privacy in prison.
Privacy. Do you honestly think you'd be able to get privacy in a prison?
Oh yeah, it's called guards in a locked room.
Do you not think that they can pay the guards off?
I don't know about you guys, but I think prisons are in an overabundance of locked rooms with no
bro.
windows.
Well, you must not have ever been in one because in every one of them locked rooms is eyeballs. And if you think they have a locked room where there's not prisoners that know from the guards themselves, usually, you're crazy. Because money's king in prison. And in Jackson State Prison in Michigan, you can get pussy, you can get crack, you can get anything you want. The answer is the same thing as it is 9 times out of 10 on the outside. Money.
Yep.
So you're saying that our prison system is entirely ineffective and it's intended for
yeah,
purpose.
but that's not what we're arguing, though, is it? The system is ineffective. We're arguing if the people that are in the system should be able to fucking vote.
Right. Thank you.
We all agree the system needs changing, but we're not arguing that.
What is the punishment for crime? What have we deemed it?
You need to pay back your debt to society because you've broken the social contract, which means you're no longer afforded the same rights under that social contract.
I agree.
Right. So you're deprived of your liberty, which is your freedom to physically move about. What, in addition to that, is considered paying back your debt to society? Is it the right to vote?
Yes.
Well, brother, it goes back. Look, then you have your right to. Okay, I'm going to go further. I'm going to take this wheel just for a second. Common sense, because I think I might know something you might not know because you're not American. Memes, simply this. What about the Fifth Amendment?
Which part?
The right to illegal search and seizures. So, in other words, guards couldn't come in their cell and search their shit just randomly. You're not realizing that every right is gone. Every right, including the right to vote.
Well, don't you still have the right to life?
Every right, moron. Don't your memes? I'm watching you do that all night.
Yes, they're looked after, but that doesn't mean that they internally have all of their rights. By what Ogre is trying to say, the rights that give you privilege, which is not life, which is not that aspect of it, it's a case of all rights that are given as forms of privilege are taken away because you've broken your social contract, are breaking the fucking law.
So it's a revocation of your liberties that you are granted under the social contract when you have been deemed guilty of a crime.
Absolutely. It sounds hard, man, but I'll say it again. Life is hard.
So where is the differentiation here between misdemeanors and felonies? Because
there is none. There is none. If it involves an incarceration, that's, in fact, I've never heard common sense guys say any different. So I'm going to stick with this line of thought because I agreed with everything that I heard. If it involves incarceration, you are now, I'm going to say it just like he said it. We will look after you. We will try not to let you get raped. We will try not to let you get beat up. You may be raped or beat up too if you go to these places because you have made a decision to break your social contract. And some of these things are minor. Well, they only get you a little time in jail. Some of these things are major. They could cost you your life in an ass raping prison. So, boys and girls, let's not break the law. How about that?
How about we not have rape in prison?
You can't. Then that's a very, very interesting thing to say, Cult of Ham.
Yeah.
The point is,
how about Ogre? You said memes expresses too much sympathy.
Empathy. I said empathy.
the problem with you is you express no empathy.
None. I express sympathy, but no empathy. You're absolutely right. None. Because I've been in jail for something I didn't do. And I still say that our system, even though I know I did some time and it all came out that I didn't do anything, but even though that, I don't care that I did 73 days because I refused to say, this is all long story, but because I refused a lot and kept my rights, I went to jail for 73 days in Orange County Jail in Orlando, Florida, 32nd Street Jail. Hell, motherfucker, hell, if you're a white boy in 1996. I'm telling you. And you know what? I still say what common sense guys said, and I don't have right now. And I'm almost done. The common sense guy. Thank you for your patience. But the me right now has no empathy for the me back then. Fuck him.
Sure. The only thing that I would say is that you're trying Cult of Ham for the point that you've just made. How about we don't have rape in prisons? I'm sorry, but unfortunately, that is a aspect of human nature. I don't like that, and I think that it should stop. But it is an aspect of human nature. You cannot stop human nature.
I mean, do prisons in Europe have a problem with rape?
Are you fucking kidding me? The prisons in England invented prison rape, you fucking dude, man. They were raping people in prison before there was an America, man. Come on.
So before
I'm talking about prisons today, not 1770.
Well, no, I'm sorry. So I'll just answer your question. Yes, people still get raped in prison in England, and they have been getting raped in England in prison for the last 500 years, or probably 1,000. You know, you're in the dungeon, right? You know, you're in the king's dungeon, and somebody's poking you in the butt. Just the way it goes.
So it's really fucking easy for everybody to understand. Human nature is that when they cannot get sex and people say no and they're held up, they will forcibly try to take sex. Yep. That's what the prison service does, and it's done all over the world. And in fact, it's even done as punishment in prisons as well. So yes, rape happens in every prison. Every.
Yeah, if we granted access to Pornhub to prisoners, would we see a decline in rape in prison?
Wait, say that again.
Obviously, means if you increase the population of the prison, then you would decrease obviously the percentage of rape. Yeah.
Oh no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. Hang on. Is that what you said? The population would that decrease?
No, what I said is if we extended the right to prisoners to go to Pornhub.com, would we see a decrease in rapes in prison?
Give them a flat.
No. The reason why you wouldn't see a thing like that is, would you be happy for the rest of your life wanking memes, or would you want to have some physical?
I have done far too much wanking in my time.
Right, so have I, mate. So have I.
It is a highly attractive thing to do. I've probably spent yes.
Memes. So have I, my friend. So have I. But the point is that eventually, at some point, you're going to find somebody attractive, and you're either going to want to have sex with them or to rape them. The reason why is because it's human nature. And it is in your nature.
Yeah, that's wrong.
I was gonna say. I mean, if the storage tanks aren't fully pressurized and they're a bit deflated, I mean, it's probably less likely.
Yeah. So yes, if you don't have enough blood to be able to get it up, then of course you're not going to be able to rape. But you're still going to.
If you just make like 5 times in a row, you're probably not going to try to bend someone over in the shower, at least as often.
Probably not.
The Pornhub would be an outlet for that sexual frustration that they have.
How do you propose a sexual outlet? What, you're going to invite lots of prostitutes to come in so they can sleep with them?
We're not arguing that. Well,
we're already arguing whether we should extend Pornhub to folks in prison here. I mean, we've got.
I mean, as a solution to prison rape, that there's other ways of, mitigating prison rape other than just ignoring the problem or bringing in Pornhub.
Look, man. Before I realized how crazy
you can go from the punitive system we have to rehabilitative system.
Fine, we can all do that, but that's not the fucking conversation we're having, is it?
No.
That's the entire conversation.
No, it's not.
No, and on top of that,
the entire conversation is, they express more empathy for their prisoners in Europe, which results in lower recidivism rates.
No, it's not. The conversation is whether or not you have broken the law in your social contract. Should you or should you not keep your right to fucking vote? It's not about whether the system should fucking change.
Yeah. And we've been all over, but that is it. And I kind of want to know now, because we've said a lot, just simple question. Memes, Matthew, I've heard another name called, but I haven't got it imprinted. Are you changing your mind at all? Do you boys really believe that they should just hand out ballots in every state facility and let the prisoners vote?
That's a very interesting question.
Is this a troll, memes? Because you're good at that. Is this just a troll? Don't bullshit me. Listen, memes. No bullshit. We're old friends, man. Just give me the kayfabe wink sometime in the next 5 minutes if this is just a troll, because I'm going to be watching you, because this is worrisome.
The thought experiment. If we're going to consider ourselves to have enlightened minds, we must be willing to entertain it with not necessarily believing it. And when Senator Sanders said that, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, even the Boston bomb," I'm like, "Whoa." Just because that is my initial.
Well, I've already decoded the Morse code from your eye blinks earlier, and I realize now what it is. So I appreciate that you're doing a thought experiment. I'm just going to say that a thought experiment is good, but when the rubber meets the road, would you like to be a prison official that was having to deal with prisoner ballots now and trying to all the things we talked about, trying to make sure nobody was influencing? Come on, there's gerrymandering out here, and once again, I know.
Receive and send letters within prison. I know because I received one from one of my former roommates before. So it's just, if that is the axis, and again, not all the states, 31 states, they prohibit felons from voting while they are currently there. And I believe it was actually lifetime as well, with the exception of two.
That wasn't voting. That wasn't voting. No. Memes, that wasn't voting. That was to do with...
Which was used as a general aggregate. That's the best data that they had.
No, it wasn't. The actual data that they provided from the wiki links was to say that they are not allowed to be part of a jury. That doesn't say that they can or cannot vote.
Right.
I think that's how a lot of states determine
who's
available on the voter rolls. Though.
Most states in the United States say if you have a felony, you cannot vote. The state I'm living in does not say that, but most states do. And I do not agree with that. I feel, and now Common Sense Guy may disagree with me on this. I don't know. I've not talked to him about it or heard his thoughts, but I do believe the day you step foot out of prison and or jail, I don't care what you've been in there for. If they say your debt's paid and you're stepping out now into society, they give you your guns and your horse back. If you understand what I'm saying.
We all agree.
Okay, y'all good. Okay, because you should have all your rights back then. You should be able to vote. You should be able to own a firearm. You should be able to do everything. Drive a car, be on the jury. I don't agree with that jury. None of that. No, you should be able to do all that.
I don't think a murderer or a bank robber should be able to get their guns
exceptions. There's always exceptions.
Well, they may watch them, but I would say this, memes, Common Sense Guy, no, there are no exceptions. Not for a bank robber or murderer. Because if you're saying now that they no longer need to be in a cage, what are you saying, that their probation? Hang on now, let me just get this out. Are you saying that their probation officer would be able to keep them from purchasing an illegal weapon and going and doing whatever they want to do? You're crazy. I can buy an illegal weapon in Saginaw, Michigan for a third of the price of a legal one. That's no shit either. Well, you can buy a Glock 17 right now on the streets of Saginaw for $100. They're $550 brand new. So you tell me. Well, and then again, like Common Sense Guy said, we're way off now. But the point is, boys, is I love the Common Sense Guy for so many reasons. But I believe this. You tell me when I'm done, Common Sense. You tell them if this isn't true. Sometimes I honestly believe that he's espousing things that he hates to say. Yes. Because it's not that it's good or that it's bad. We weigh things that way too much. It's logical or it's illogical. Cancer's bad, but it's real. I mean, and these things, we have to deal with these things. So, and I'll blubber now because I really appreciate the time I was able to speak. You boys got my blood boiling. I mean, holy fuck, man. I mean, it's because it's so much to ask, not only of the prison guards, but I want to reiterate, here in the United States, they have made the prison industrial complex. Yes, memes, it should be torn down, but it's not. And if you did what you're talking about, I only named Ionia and Jackson, Ishpeming in the Upper Peninsula. There's 3 places in Michigan where the number of inmates outranks the number of citizens in the town. The inmates would be voting for the mayor. Now, have y'all ever heard an expression, don't let the inmates run the asylum?
Yeah. I mean,
should we tie their ability to vote to where they lived, to their last?
No,
That's the way it
address?
is, brother. That's the way it. Oh, I see. That's
hang
where
on,
they live.
hang on.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we are saying that there should be a blanket law and legislation on it. We don't agree that it works completely. We do think that there may be some instances where we might be able to compromise. But at the moment, the blanket statement and blanket legislation works to a point. Again, said this many times. You are now suggesting that we now are going to take punitive action and trying to make sure that we can then decide who should vote by where they are. Nobody's suggesting that. Just you.
What?
No.
I think we were saying basically if since an inmate is housed in a particular location that may not be necessarily.
Ogre's argument, I'm sure he can correct me if I'm wrong. Ogre's argument wasn't the fact that we should legislate to make sure these people can't vote. He was pointing out that if you allow these people to vote, that they then have that aspect to do that. Not that they do, not that they can, not that he thinks it should happen.
That's spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to add to that. That's spot on.
Well, if somebody after they get out of the state penitentiary, if they just they grab their guns, they hop back on their horse and everything. I mean, if the only thing we were taking away was their actual freedom of movement there, then why would we take away their other rights?
Have you all ever heard of a guy named Nelson Mandela?
Yes.
They put him in prison, this rabble rouser, this guy that incited riots that rose up against the state. They put him in prison. And I just read today on Drudge that the colored, and I'd have to have Conscious Caracal on here to absolutely correct me on all of the nomenclature of the different tribes and the characteristics of the people, but the coloreds there are not like the coloreds, what we would call in the United States. They're different. They're a mixture of, I can't remember, so I don't want to go there, but they're a different segment. They're not black. They're not Africans. That's why I'm saying this. They're the coloreds. They are different than the Afrikaans, which are white. They're different than the Africans, which are black. They're the coloreds. There's three mains, and I just said all three. So let me get to the point. Right now, they're talking about the colored neighborhoods are lamenting for apartheid. And it's coming out more and more that the black people are lamenting for apartheid, not because they drove them away, but because since the blacks have taken control with the evil Nelson Mandela, the man that should have stayed in prison till the fucking day he died, but people got empathetic. They got soft. They started believing things about race, what do you call it? Identity politics, about the paint on your outside means something about the guts on your inside. And they let a murderous, rabble-rousing upstart out. He took control. And now there are 108 more laws, stricter than apartheid, put in by the black people that are in control. So look, man, all of this stuff. Look, so let me add thought experiment. Memes, you going to kill baby Hitler or not?
What? Why would you kill a baby?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, you wouldn't kill Hitler?
No.
You know, and we could go either way, right?
No, I wouldn't kill a baby.
You take the kid, maybe make sure he doesn't go. You make sure he gets into that goddamn art school.
Well,
or maybe shoot him when he's doing his speeches.
That would probably be the better way. At least he's actually doing something.
No, but I said baby Hitler. I said baby Hitler.
We know.
Yeah, I know. I think everybody got it, but Matthew.
No, I got it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew. You're a genius, sir. I didn't mean anything by that.
I've only got one question left that I would really like to ask YouTube memes and Cult of Ham. Is if you think that, as you said before, you all think that the prisoners should get the right to vote. If you think all prisoners should get the right to vote, then why do you think that there should be a caveat thrown in there that the lunatics, that the murderers, that the rapists, that the pedophiles don't?
Did I not answer this earlier?
No, you kind of obfuscated and went round it by saying that you thought it was an emotional response. You didn't actually.
I said it's probably an emotional response. I don't know.
Sure, but as I said before, does that mean that we should legislate on an emotive aspects, especially when it comes to legislating on aspects of law?
I mean, a lot of shit's being legislated on emotion. Should it? Probably not.
Never.
Okay, that's fine. And then I think we're under agreement. Now, memes, you didn't answer the question. So would you like to answer it now?
Oh, I'm beginning to think a little bit more and more as this conversation has gone long. Maybe we should end the penitentiary binary, and I don't. We need a third category of
So you're
folks.
not
That
going
are,
to answer the question
Right.
then? So you're not going to answer the question then?
what is the exact question? What is
The exact question is, why is it that you think that prisoners should have the right to vote, but you think certain prisoners shouldn't? Why is it a blanket statement, either or?
So it's nuanced.
Sorry?
So it's no. What I'm saying is it's nuanced, because if we're going to go down this road, because currently under the framework we're saying is people whom are convicted of felonies who are currently serving within prison. My natural thought is the current meta we have is no. Senator Sanders brought that up, and I started to think about it. I listened to some different folks, and actually, probably mostly just from my own thoughts. I'm like, well, is this a freedom of speech issue? So that started to make me a bit skeptical of maybe the system we have right now. So dude, I really don't know. This is something you would have to look at a lot of data. You would have to see how it would potentially impact society. Because, I mean, even on the stream here, we said, yeah, we don't want the country to go to shit, and we don't allow these people to vote. The country moves along. But if we did as well, would the country go to complete shit? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that would happen. Is it going to harm the country?
That's not the argument, and that's not the question I posed.
Could you say it one more time? I'm sorry. I'm very ADD.
If you say so.
No, he's very trollish, but go ahead.
Yes. The actual point I'm making is that you think that there should be differences in some people should get a vote and some people shouldn't that are incarcerated. We can all agree that people that are outside of the incarceration, regardless of what they've done, should get most of their rights back. We can argue on aspects of different rights, but generally we think that you should get most of their rights back. So why is it that you think that some people should get a vote and some people shouldn't because that they're prisoners?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm entertaining the idea. I realize where we are. What I'm saying is there something to that if we view it as a freedom of speech thing, or is it more along the lines of this is your totality of your punishment for having been convicted of a crime under the judicial system?
I understand, but why do you think murderers should lose their right of freedom of speech and lose their right to vote?
This is going to sound extremely controversial. Should they?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not controversial. It's a yes. The controversial would be, why would you think that murderers shouldn't lose their right to vote?
Well, because if it's a right granted of the Constitution, are we punishing somebody for?
But it's not.
You can't go back to that, memes. We already decided they can't have a gun, so you can't go back to that, man. You
I
can't
know,
go
but
back.
that goes into the argument is, well, that's the thing. What is the reason for that argument? The argument for that is because they could be a danger to themselves or someone else.
Look, you don't have the right to privacy. You don't have the right to the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment. You don't have the right to the First Amendment. You know that, right? You can start talking, and a guard can tell you to shut the fuck up. And if you don't, honest to God, they can tell you to shut the fuck. And if you don't quit talking, they'll send the goons. I've watched it happen to some young black kid, man. It was getting fucking crazy, and he just wouldn't shut up. They sent the goon squad in there. They they pepper sprayed him, beat his fucking ass, hog-tied him with handcuffs, and drug him away. And after that, I don't know. All I know is I shut up when I was told.
I mean, that I would argue that would be a violation of his rights as you described it.
Not in jail, it ain't. No,
So you're saying jail is a different system.
You don't have your rights. That's the only thing I've ever heard common sense guy or myself say tonight. There's no argument. You keep going back to the Bill of Rights. We keep saying you don't have your rights in jail. You don't have.
I disagree. I mean, are rights or are they privileges?
No, they're rights, but you're not understanding. Let's get it straight. Hang on. Let's get something straight now. No one, including Thomas Jefferson, would say that one of your rights that can be taken away is life or your fortune.
I mean,
Because
why not?
listen, hang on, the boys. One thing I don't agree with right now is civil asset forfeiture. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but that's something I don't agree with. When they took any of the old, when they took Lucky Luciano to jail, when they took Al Pacino to jail, or Al Pacino, what I'm talking about, I said
Al Capone.
Al Capone. I can't believe I said Al Pacino. Al Capone to jail.
Well,
They didn't take his money. They did not take his fortune. They knew everything he made, he got illegally. It wasn't until the 70s that they started that seizure shit. So I don't agree with that. You do have your right to your life and your fortune, but you lose your liberty, which means your liberty to free speech, your liberty to own a firearm, your liberty to have the fifth right to not have illegal searches and seizures, your right to vote, the whole 9 yards. You lose it all.
Agreed.
I mean, well, if you don't have your right to free speech and the right to vote, why should you have the right to life and your right to your fortune?
Because okay, let me ask you a question. If I was able,
okay, hang on. In some states, they don't have the right to life, hence why they are put onto death row.
correct.
Well, I was asking Ogre.
Well,
Oh,
my
so
answer,
it's not like my answer then.
no, my answer would be simple too, and I'm not going to steal his. I would just tell you, look, man, would you rather have me gag you or cut your throat? And that's where it comes down to being silenced, not being able to say whatever you want to a guard, not being able to look at guard, because this is what happened to me with the black guy. So he's like, fuck you, cracker, fuck you, motherfucker, fuck your mother. And he just wouldn't stop. You know, hey, look, in the street, you can get up in somebody's face and you can tell them, fuck you. I see it happen all the time. I just watched Fleckus Talks for an hour today, man. I mean, this shit's crazy. But in jail, no. You can't look at an inmate and say, fuck you, motherfucker, and blah, 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 if they're watching it. And you definitely can't do it to a guard.
I mean,
And if you do, look, and
between-
that's getting long. All I'm going to say is it's all a drag. It's all a pull away from common sense guys' premise. It really is. All this is. It's all a distraction. It's all a look over here. Let's feel bad for him. The final point, my final point, I've got to go, gentlemen. I really do. But my final point would be is listen to common sense, not just the guy, but what's ringing in your head right now telling you boys that the common sense guy is correct. Listen to that. And that will tell you that you don't take somebody's life. But if they've done something horrible, you take a lot of other rights away, and one of those is voting. Be good to your friends and family before you know it, they're fucking gone. Love you, JB. Keep it up.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Take care.
I think we found Aircraft Sparky's cousin.
Yeah, not too sure about that. He's a very, very bold libertarian. He just is very practical with that aspect of things.
He's but a humble chicken farmer.
Yes, indeed. But he is very practical with that aspect and thing. The point that he was making is that if you have criminals that are bad people, then at that point in time, you have to take away some of their rights to make sure that those people don't take on the guards, for instance. That's it. It's just a case of them repaying their debt back to society for breaking the social contract. You've already said that they shouldn't have some rights. Now prove why they should have the other rights.
Because hashtag freedom.
Then hashtag freedom, give them a fucking gun.
Well, the big thing I think what we're losing out on here is the whole due process thing. It's because, and according to, what was it? I think the Fourth Amendment there, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So the argument would be, if somebody has gone through the process and has been convicted in a court of law, then there's defined justification for removing certain rights. And then at that point, we argue which rights are included, because that's where we're at now. We're actually at a very focused place right now.
Sure.
I think that's progress, man. I think that's I don't know. I found this conversation fascinating.
I find it very, very interesting. That's the reason why I wanted to have this conversation. Not necessarily with all of the people that are here, but the people that have turned up have been really amazing about putting their input through. And I think it's been very, very productive overall.
Yeah.
So, no, I honestly do think it's been productive. I do think that we've been able to iron out certain differences. We've come to different compromises, and I think not that we've solved the world problems, because we never fucking will. We're 3-4 guys at one point talking about shit that we can't change.
You gotta start somewhere, brother.
Exactly.
I want to respond to something in the chat. I would bend over and let myself get fucked, okay? Because I like getting fucked in the ass.
Yeah, but would that be your right being taken away from him actually doing it? Or would you be forcing yourself to accept him doing that to say it's your rights?
Dude,
Well,
I'd be the one raping the other guy. Like, no, don't get this fat fuck off me.
Well, that seems a little oppressive and everything. And again, you want to be consensual. These are the parts of society that we want to focus on. I get your point. To each their own. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Some folks like a little butt loving.
Well, can I
will
make a point before we move on? Can I quickly make a point before we move on?
Right.
We were all saying beforehand, and I know it was said in jest, so don't take it that way as a direct saying that you would accept this. But you were saying that rape in itself is not a natural thing. There you are joking about it. I'm not saying that you accept it. I'm just saying that if you can joke about it, and eventually you might think that you'd be the one doing it.
Oh God,
Yeah,
I blocked that part of our conversation from my mind. Why'd you remind me?
It's a joke.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said at the end, I'm joking, of course, because obviously that's a fucking slippery slope and fucking a fallacy in itself. You can't just say something and laugh about it and then go and do it. I was obviously joking.
Oh well, I'm autistic. Whatever.
Let's let's stick with the saying of the Boondock Saints: "Do not kill, do not rape, do not steal." These are principles that every man can agree upon.
I agree.
All right, there we go. All right.
Surprisingly, but I mean, I understand where your guys' arguments is from. I really do understand where your guys' arguments is from, where you think that you should have people being able to vote, being able to put due process in, and being able to be citizens, so to speak, full-pledged citizens. But if you think that for the lower end of the echelon of prisoners, then you have to think that for all prisoners.
I mean, why?
Do you not understand why?
We delved back into the end of the full circle, and now we're navigating again with nuance. So I don't know. I think we've covered most of the things right now. I didn't realize I need to go do a couple of things in a few minutes. So
no worries.
Is anything else you wanted to cover over the next couple of minutes?
I'm trying to get somebody called Reverend to come on so we can talk about Tommy Robinson, but he seems not to want to come on at the minute.
Go on, CSG. Sorry,
I was going to say if we finished and we haven't got anything to really go on, then that's fine at this moment in time. I think we've had a good. Oh, that's fine. He can't come on anyway at this minute.
I just want to mention real quick that I had to really bite my tongue when Ogre went on his
tirade.
On his tirade against Nelson Mandela and getting rid of apartheid.
Oh, that I thought a lot of that stuff happened after he passed away.
Yeah,
most of the stuff that Ogre was mentioning happened mostly afterwards. But I mean.
And besides, Nelson Mandela died in prison. Don't you know that?
Oh, well, I thought that was the Mandela effect.
Tell that. The butterfly effect would say that, yes. Right, I'm going to have to get off as well because my missus is looking at me and thinking that I'm an arsehole, so I'm going to have to get off anyway. So, do we have any sort of closing words?
No, not really.
No, you don't want to show a channel or show your Twitter or anything, or say anything about what you're doing in the future?
God, don't go to my Twitter.
Yeah, don't go to his Twitter.
Please, I'm already dealing with one, uber obnoxious asshole on Twitter. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you know about him, CSG. He's it's really hard to describe this guy because this guy has like uber fundamentalist, uber right wing beliefs that make your head spin.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can only deal with one of those assholes at a time. I dealt with Humane, I dealt with Aircraft Sparky, I dealt with Humane again, and now I got this guy.
Fair enough. No problem. What about you, Mr.
Hey, Donnie! Donnie's here!
Oh.
I swear to God, I thought this was tomorrow.
I love you too, Donnie.
Is that Hammy?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Ham. That's Mr. Ham. Yeah. To be fair, mate, unfortunately, we were just about to finish.
Hey everybody. I hope it's been a great stream. I swear to God, I thought this was supposed to be tomorrow. And I'm sorry. And I generally feel the need to apologize when I'm a jackass. So, my fault. CSG actually said Saturday, and I said, yeah, but I have stuff to do on Sunday, and then kept rolling with it being on Sunday because I am an idiot.
I mean, let's be honest. CSG is really inconsiderate for living in England and not having American Standard Time. You know.
True. I will agree
You're
with
not wrong.
How,
I will
how
agree with
dare he use the core GMAT time?
Oh, you see, the world revolves around America, and not just America, but me. Okay.
Well, yeah, to be fair, I've seen how big you are.
Oh, you're making a gravity joke, aren't you?
Hey, come on! I try, lifting weights, but they keep breaking because I keep crushing my bicycle and shit.
Oh, you have like super ogre
The
strength.
gym keeps collapsing from out from under me. My couch is really comfortable.
No problem. Right, memes. Last words, because I need to fuck off.
Oh, Hakuna Matata.
What a wonderful phrase. Right. I think this has been quite a productive conversation. I've actually enjoyed everything that I've been able to talk to and talk about. So I've actually enjoyed it. Unfortunately, some people couldn't turn up. It doesn't matter. They turned up, they said hello, they said bye. It's a good thing. We can do another stream about it at some other point, so it's not a problem. And thank you very much for coming on and apologizing and everything else like that. And thank you everybody else for turning up and having a conversation and all in the chat. Thank you guys and cheers. Bye-bye for now.